The chapter begins with the fact that two very beautiful girls on the bed were reaching out to the protagonist. The girl from the Jade Clan Zhao Tekui only mentioned the name of the protagonist, and Jade Clan's assistant Lu Xiaoning said she couldn't wait any longer. The protagonist, pulling off his clothes, asked not to hurry because everyone has things to do. He is the gatekeeper of the Jade Clan, and the protagonist's name is Zhang Lan. Immediately, a certain girl made a hole in the wall and shouted that it was an outrage, and Zhang Lan was scared. This was the empress of the Xuaniao Jade Clan. She called them dogs, men and women. Xuaniao asked how he dared to take advantage of her absence. The protagonist smiled and said that now she was here and they would be together. Tekui and Xiaoning hugged the protagonist and he told them to ask the empress to try out the weapon. Zhang Lan grabbed Empress Xuaniao's hand and she was very embarrassed and asked to let her go. She's the empress. The protagonist heard some sounds and did not understand what those sounds were and noted that it became very noisy. The girls were very excited and Xiaoning asked Zhang Lan to hurry up. After that, we are shown the room of the gatekeeper of the Jade Clan and it turns out that the protagonist was asleep all this time. Someone was knocking on the door and shouting for the protagonist to open the door. Immediately, the protagonist woke up and was told to get up. After that, we are shown the gates of the Jade Clan. There were girls standing near them and one asked why the gates were closed during the day. They were always open before. Another thought that they were no longer letting students in. The brunette asked how this could happen. The Jade Clan is the only female clan among the 6 clans in Huangzhou. All the female nuns here are proficient in martial arts. Besides, they are young and each of them is submissive to their country. Her friend asked if there were any smelly men who would bother. Her friend replied by asking how this could happen. The Jade Clan hates men the most, and within a radius of 100 kilometers, there is not a single male. The protagonist Sleepy opened the doors and asked if something was wrong. The two girls were just stunned when they saw the protagonist, and he was surprised by their reaction. Immediately, 2 girls were scared of the man and started running away screaming, and the protagonist panicked a little. His name is Zhang Liang. He is a man who works as a gate guard for the Jade Clan at the foot of the mountain. It may seem strange to somehow a clan consisting exclusively of women has a male guardian. It all started 3 days ago. He was taking a bath at home and suddenly felt that the bottom of the tub was cracking. And through the portal I got into a new world and flew down. He fell onto the stone statue of the Jade Clan ancestor worship ceremony, which shocked all the girls and the empress. At that moment, he thought he was going to be killed and a lot of swords were put to his face. The empress told him not to kill him and to send him to guard the gate at the foot of the mountain. That's how he came here and became a gate guard. He didn't have any skills, so he had to hide here for a while. But this empress is really very good. If only he could tell her that he liked her. Immediately, his heart ached and he did not understand why he was burning all over and what was the matter. The protagonist was in great pain and had severe shortness of breath. The activation of the heart awakening system immediately began. The reading of the information about the Lord is completed. A god-level entry system. The protagonist was in the mind of a deity. Zhang Lan was in the form of a corporeal spirit and did not understand what kind of place this was. The system informed him that he had activated the god-level system, and now he was given the number 1 login task. Task category. Specify the designated for logging in. Required time, until midnight today. Task content. Get to the Empress's bedchamber to complete the login. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The protagonist was very scared and asked the system if she was joking, because he needed to go to the Empress's palace in the dead of night. Before he gets within 800 meters, he will be chopped into minced meat. Visiting at 3 a.m., he asked if the system said it wasn't suicide. The system replied to shut up. He has no right to resist with the tasks issued by the system. The protagonist immediately flew down screaming. The system finally added that if he did not complete the task of the system, then he was finished. He immediately plopped down on the floor in his room. The protagonist began to cry and did not understand what kind of mockery it was. After that, evening came and we were shown the Jade Clan. Outside the main palace, the protagonist changed into a ninja costume and thought that instead of subjecting himself to a painful death, it was better to try to complete the task. The reward for completing the task should be something that will save his life. He ran past the columns and thought that if he was seen, he would be beaten to death. He prayed to God that everything would go well. The protagonist ran up to the Empress's palace and stood there for about 10 minutes. Zhang Lan didn't know if the system was joking with him. He is already there, but she does not answer him, so he was very surprised. Immediately, the system told him to go to the bedroom, which made the protagonist very surprised. Zhang carefully opened the door of the palace. At this time, the Empress was immersed in meditation. The protagonist noted that it was bad, because the Empress was still awake. Xuaniao did not understand who it was. He wanders outside her bedchamber and dares to break in. If she hadn't been able to stop at the crucial moment of her dive, she would have finished him off. The protagonist carefully began to penetrate inside and wanted the Empress not to look at him. Immediately, he stepped on the floor of the palace and a glow appeared under it. A huge yellow ray appeared in a small explosion. The girls were surprised and turning around. Tekui noticed that this sound was in the direction of the palace. Immediately, the Empress opened her eyes and was surprised. She saw in front of her a huge yellow ray, inside of which was the protagonist. The system congratulated the protagonist for logging in. His reward is 1. His body becomes divine with an impenetrable heart. The second reward, a pair of high-speed boots. Immediately, the beam stopped and got a little tired, and therefore he had shortness of breath. The Empress rushed at him and shouted who it was. The girl raised her foot to hit the guy. The protagonist was very embarrassed that his mouth was already watering, because he saw the Empress's hole and said that when he looks into the abyss also looks at him. Immediately, the system reported that the heart engine was activated. The divine body is charged at 40%. The protagonist felt the force. He could feel the endless power creeping out of his body. The girl hit the protagonist, but he grabbed her leg, which surprised the girl. The Empress was surprised that he took her mega punch with one hand and did not understand who he was. The protagonist turned around and saw that the Empress's subordinates were approaching the palace. The protagonist ran away and began to run away, and with a simple movement he jumped up and ran away. The Empress was in great pain. He interrupted her dive and she strikes back. Xiaoning asked Xuanyao if she was okay, but she didn't understand where he was. The Empress shouted for him to close the gate quickly. He must not be allowed to leave the Jade clan. She didn't understand who he was. Other girls came after that. The Empress sat down in her seat and Xiaoning asked Tekui if she was responsible for protecting the clan. Tekui replied that she had made a mistake, because she did not expect that there would be traitors in the clan who would attack the palace at night. Xiaoning replied that this was not a disciple of the clan. She felt it. It still smells like a stinky man in here. All the girls were very surprised by this information. After that, they started looking for him and could not find him anywhere. And the protagonist ran away from the palace as fast as he could. The girl heard that someone was running and they wanted to check there, but the protagonist stopped. The protagonist immediately jumped out the window, and the girls noted that there was no way to catch him. Zhang Lan got into a building where there was a lot of steam and was at a loss. He noted that this place suits him, and he was delighted. He was walking cautiously and saw the girls who were bathing and was very embarrassed. The protagonist realized that he was in a raspberry patch. He couldn't hold back anymore, and behind him, the girl saw a guy. Immediately, the girl became confused and screamed violently. The girls did not understand who he was and how the man got here. The girls wanted to catch him and shouted for him to stop where he was. They also had to be careful. You can't let him touch them. The protagonist ran out of the building in shock with a towel on his head. Now, when I came down from the palace, I told the girls that it could only be that smelly guy. They should go and arrest Zhang Lan. If he dared to resist, they would grind him to powder. They were already on their way to the clan gate. Immediately, the girl saw the smoke and asked what it was, and the current was surprised. The system said that the divine body with an impenetrable heart is charged at 130%. It was very dangerous and I had to run away. The protagonist believed that his body was about to explode. Tekui ran after him and shouted that he was a pervert and asked where he was running to. She ran after him with her hammer, and the protagonist thought he was recognized. Immediately, the gate was opened by the disciples of the Black Dagger clan, who came to deliver the letter. They didn't understand what was going on here. The chief among them told his friends to let him in first, and then throw daggers. The protagonist saw the daggers that flew at him and was surprised. He immediately got angry and noted that it was time to run. Zhang released some energy into them and asked them not to interfere with him, and the beam even destroyed the earth a little. After that, the next day came, noon. The protagonist was tied up and called a rebel. He was in the main hall of the Jade clan. Tekui asked him if he knew what crime he had committed last night. The protagonist made innocent eyes and asked why he was here, because he did not remember what happened. Tekui asked why he was pretending to be a fool. He also pretends to be a beginner, although in practice his skills are excellent. At least, this is the 6th level of practical perfection. Xiaoning was surprised and noted that this was impossible, flowing only at the peak of practical perfection. Tekui shouted that she had witnesses. She asked if they had been beaten by this man. Who is the gate guard? The guys replied with one voice that they couldn't do anything, and the girls called them weaklings and nobodies. The guy said that they did not remember. They decided to firmly defend the masculinity of the Black Dagger clan because it was impossible to admit it. The first girl asked if they had not been blown to pieces and that they had misunderstood them. The other girls felt that otherwise the Black Dagger students would be completely worthless. Tekui was surprised that they did not remember, and the protagonist decided to act and said that he seemed to remember. He said that she beat them up, and then accused him. He did not realize that she was so malicious. Tekui was surprised by his words. Immediately, these three remembered and said that it was her. 3 disciples of their Black Dagger clan were beaten by her. If it was the hand of Zhao Tekui, the head gate guard of the Jade clan known as the Grumpy Witch, it would be quite reasonable. They accused her, and the girl was even more surprised. Xiaoning asked the empress about her decision. Xuaniao said that if someone invades the clan, they deserve to die, so it is necessary to act. The guy was scared and said that they were ordered to hand over 6 orders. Immediately, the 3 flew out of the palace and they shouted that the empress would regret it. Zhang Lan stood up and said that if everything was okay, then he would return to the gate. Xiaoning told him to wait, she would check everything first. After a moment, she said that Zhang Lan really didn't have any strength, let alone practical perfection, didn't even have the fortitude. Tekui was surprised, and Lan smiled contentedly. Xiaoning said she was the only one who saw it and asked if she saw someone come through the gate and beat everyone up in one fell swoop. Tekui was angry and shouted that he really did it. She grabbed him by the neck and started strangling him, saying that he was bullying her and then she would beat him until he told the truth. The protagonist asked her what she was doing. The girl leaned her melons against his face and squeezed his neck. This feeling returns again. His divine body begins to recharge. The load level is 50%. The girl sat on his shoulders and clutched his head with her legs and shouted at him not to move, and his body was charged at 70%. The protagonist got very excited and realized that he could no longer hold back. The empress stood up and said to stop and that they would talk about it later. Tekui was embarrassed and let go of the protagonist, and he coughed violently. Immediately, the protagonist found himself back in the consciousness of the deity. He was informed that he would now receive the 2nd and 3rd tasks. The protagonist was surprised. The 2nd task, specify the designated for logging in. Required time, 72 hours. Task content, get to the peak of Mount Wanman to complete the login. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The 3rd task, specify the designated for logging in. Required time, 72 hours. The content of the task, to force a woman to wear the specified item. The reward for completion is unknown, and the penalty for failure is death. The protagonist did not understand what kind of object it was. He thought it was a necklace or bracelet. The deity gave him beautiful women's tights and said that this was it, and the protagonist was very confused, but he was glad. After that, they were in the bedchamber of the empress's palace. Xiaoning turned to the empress and said that Tekui would not lie, and therefore she felt that something was wrong with this Zhang Lang. Besides, he's a man. She didn't understand why she insisted on stopping him. Xuaniao told her to go downstairs because she wanted to get some rest, and she agreed. The empress thought that the strength of the Jade clan was falling now. Although he is still among the top 6 clans, they are already casting their predatory glances. She remembered the day of ancestor worship. The students are weak, so the improvement progressed very slowly and led to this situation. She asked the ancestral spirits to guide the disciples on the path of power. Immediately, the protagonist fell from the sky. The empress thought that his appearance was definitely given to them by the spirits. In addition, this person has a special strength and body. Obviously, he has never improved, but he can explode with furious force. She didn't understand what kind of practices he was using. At that time, the protagonist was in the guard's room and took out tights. The protagonist was lying on the bed and looking at the tights. He thought that the system was idiotic, because how could such a shameful task be possible? Even if the girls of this era do not understand anything, it is clear that this is complete hooliganism. He didn't understand how to do it and his head was already spinning. Someone was watching the protagonist through the hole. It was a leak. She kicked down the door and shouted that he was caught and pointed at him with her finger, and the protagonist was very scared and asked what it was. The girl asked what he was holding in his hand right now. The protagonist hid the tights and he replied fearfully that he had nothing. The girl grabbed him and took out his hand with tights, saying that she had been watching him through the hole in the door for a long time. The protagonist was very embarrassed that she was sitting on him and asked her to calm down, because he was in a lot of pain. The protagonist, confused, replied that it was a bandage. His divine body is starting to charge. The charge level is 85%. The girl began to stretch the tights and said that it was a very strange bandage, and very elastic. The protagonist also noted that it was so dangerous that he almost charged up completely. The protagonist did not know. This charge is really accumulating. He needs to find a place to let off steam. Otherwise, sooner or later something will happen. The girl put the black stockings in her pocket and said that it was a very suspicious thing and that's why she was taking it away. The protagonist began to panic and wanted to say something. Tekui immediately pinned the protagonist against the wall and said that he was very good at pretending. He was shaming her in front of the empress. The protagonist also assured that he really did not understand what she was talking about. Immediately, the girl threw a bag over the protagonist and replied that it didn't matter because he was going to die soon anyway. A moment later, she rushed out of the protagonist's house with Lan in a bag, who was screaming for help. The girl said that those who offend her will not live 3 days at home. The protagonist, sitting in a bag, thought that this crazy woman was going to drag him to a deserted place and finish him off. He began to panic a lot and did not understand why he was such a loser. Then this system wanted to kill him, then this one was abnormal. Immediately, the system reported that he had completed the second task. The protagonist was surprised and did not understand what it was. His reward, invisibility. The ability to be completely invisible for 3 minutes. The girl dragged the protagonist to the peak of Mount Wanman and threw the bag on the ground. Tekui told him to go out and see what the place that would become a cemetery for him looked like. And some creatures were already looking at the girl from the fort. After that, the protagonist was digging a huge hole. Zhang Lan asked Tekui why take everything seriously. The protagonist thought that she was close to the truth and did not know what to do. The charging has not been completed yet. He does not know if it is worth communicating with her. The girl replied that she always clearly distinguishes between good and evil. He is digging a hole for himself. That is, only death awaits him. He has only 2 ways. Either she will bury him here or smash him to pieces. Of course, he has a third way. To demonstrate his strength, he has to hit her. The protagonist was very scared and shouted at her to turn her back on him. The girl thought that he wanted to deceive her. She would turn around and he would run away. She did this number when she was 6 years old. She won't fall for it. There were 2 monsters with guns behind her who wanted to kill her. She thought it was really dangerous. The monsters hit the ground, but the girl managed to jump away. Immediately, they started throwing spears at her, and she dodged, but one hit her right in the shoulder. The girl spun in the air and did not understand how many warriors from other clans could get here. Tekui shouted that they were messing with the wrong one and hit the ground. She stood on the ground and said that those who would throw arrows at her from behind, she would take them to the Empress. Immediately, the girl realized that she had been sent and it hurt her. The protagonist was sitting in the pit and also realized that the arrow was poisonous and the poison was too strong, and the girl couldn't even stand properly. After that, we are shown the head of a hostile clan. The old lady said that she wanted to pass unnoticed, but this insignificant offspring of the Empress caught her eye, or they will kill her first and avenge her dead sons. Tekui was surprised and couldn't even think what she would meet. She asked, she didn't come here to steal. The monster asked what to do with this boy and pointed his finger at the protagonist. The old woman replied that he was just a useless guardian and needed to be killed. The monster rushed at him, and Zhang Lan shouted that they had misunderstood. He's just a lumberjack and doesn't know what kind of girl she is. Tekui stood up and hit the monster with the words that she was their opponent, and the protagonist was surprised. The girl told Zhang Lan that these people were their sworn enemies. They have been locked up for hundreds and thousands of years. Now they are making their way to them, having some kind of plan. She would detain them, and he had to return and report to the Empress. The old woman realized that he was relying on her and said that she would kill him first and let magic into him. Immediately, Tekui was greatly embarrassed. Immediately, a yellow ray appeared behind her, which protected the girl. The old woman was greatly surprised by all this. The protagonist held out his fist and said that was all she could say. Zhang Lan came forward and said that he couldn't leave her alone and run away. He can't hold back anymore. The system informed him that the remaining energy of the divine body was 80%. The protagonist estimated that her strike accounted for only 5% of her body's energy. The old woman shouted for her sons to stand still and finish off the protagonist, and immediately they ran forward. The protagonist began to fight off the monsters and asked, if anything, why doesn't she go down and complete this task, or is she just afraid? He hit the last monster and it flew forward. Zhang Lan shouted for her to come to him. Zhao Tekui felt a strange feeling and blushed a little. The protagonist turned to the old woman and told her to run away while he gave her a chance. The leader was surprised. He held out his hands and told her to attack him with her strongest moves. He promises not to shy away from them. The girl was delighted and asked if she had been told about it. The old woman agreed with him and assured him that she would do as she said. The protagonist thought that he couldn't take too many risks. He uses 30% of his energy to defend himself. The old woman shouted for him to take a look at the strength of her clan. She began to create a lightning bolt and fired it at the protagonist. Tekui screamed the protagonist's name out of fright. Zhang Lan put down the block and tensed up a bit. The old woman shot a huge purple ray at the protagonist. After a moment, it was over and Chang was glowing yellow all over. The protagonist was confused and asked, "And this is her strongest move?" He felt that he was impenetrable, and she was worthless because she was wasting so much energy. The old woman was confused and simply did not believe it. She didn't understand how it didn't bother him and where this guy came from. After a moment, the protagonist screamed in pain and fell to the ground, and the old woman was surprised. Zhao Tekui ran up to the protagonist and asked what was wrong with him. Zhang noted that this is an insidious trick. He missed it. The protagonist grabbed the girl by the hand and shouted for them to run away, and the old woman shouted for them to catch them. She also wondered if it could be that her strength would increase over time. The monster told them to look more carefully. They were both injured and couldn't run far. The protagonist and Tekui were in the cave. The guy said that he had lost his strength and the girl asked what they should do now. Zhang Lan asked her not to worry, because there was a way to get her back. He asked if the black stockings she took from his room were still with her. The girl, taking them out, agreed. She asked what she should do about it. Use everyone as a dressing for her wound. The protagonist replied in denial. He told her to put them on and was embarrassed. But Tekui was at a loss. The girl began to slowly put on tights. Tekui asked if it would really work. The protagonist noted that there is no time to linger. The protagonist asked how much time he had, and if he could still joke with him. Now the fate of all mankind is in her hands. Tekui didn't understand what kind of material they were made of. They are so soft and silky. And where did this inexplicable feeling of shame come from? The girl blushed deeply and realized that she just needed to put them on. In a moment, they were completely on top of her. She felt that the tights were so tight, drafty, and hugged her bottom so tightly. It was a wonderful feeling. The system congratulated the protagonist on completing the third task. His reward, a charm capsule. After taking it, it can increase the attractiveness of a particular person by 300%. The duration is 1 hour. Sexual intercourse is prohibited during this time. The protagonist was glad that everything was done. The second reward, an amulet of evasion. After you put it on, you can get a 100% evasion effect from any attack for 20 minutes. The protagonist turned around and wanted to say something. But when I saw the girl, I was just shocked by her beauty, and Tekui said that she kind of put it on. The protagonist charged his body to 105% and the system reported that it was dangerous. He was very hot and he thought his body was going to explode, so he ran out of the cave. The girl noted that he ran away so embarrassed and quickly, and I thought he was a noble man. The protagonist ran straight at the monsters, and they said they had found him. The protagonist, creating a ball in his hand, said that the superpower came to him just in time. He immediately shot a huge yellow ray at them, which flew through the entire forest. The old woman felt a great power and thought that the Empress was here. The monster asked the head what they should do now. The old woman replied that it was time to give in to the evil spirits, and they should kill them. The monsters ran forward screaming. And at that moment the old woman began to run away and be afraid. She didn't want to die, so she decided to run away. The monsters ran at Chang and immediately a yellow ray flashed near them. After a moment, they all exploded. The protagonist ran up to the old woman and hit her in the back with a scream. Tekui caught up with them and asked him not to kill the head, but to leave as a witness. The protagonist grabbed her by the hood and asked if she was breathing, and the old woman just grunted. Then he grabbed her by the hair and told her to tell them why they had come here, and the old woman wanted to confess everything in pain. The protagonist tied up the old woman and Tekui said that the third and fourth sisters were guarding Lingfeng Gorge. There's not even a drop of water leaking out. She was wondering how they got in. Besides them, there is someone else. How many clans are there? The old woman was angry and said it was better to kill her because she wouldn't say anything. The old woman looked at the beautiful stockings of the girl. Immediately, the protagonist slapped her in the face and asked where she was staring at. She screamed that they could torture her as much as they wanted, but the revival of her clan could not be stopped. Even if he kills her, the other clans will come after them. She shouted that long live evil and began to glow. The protagonist used fast boots, grabbed Tekui by the hand and shouted that they needed to run because the old woman decided to self-destruct. A moment later, a strong purple explosion thundered, but the protagonist was able to jump out of there. After that, the smoke cleared and the whole mountain was destroyed. The girl noted that the old woman really decided to self-destruct and called her crazy. The protagonist was upset because the speed boots turned out to be disposable. It was after midnight and the protagonist and Tekui were in the Jade clan. The girl told him not to dare to tell anything about what happened today or she would cut out his tongue. The protagonist was surprised and wanted to say something about the clan. Tekui repeated and told him to shut up. In response, the protagonist told him to take off his tights. The girl was embarrassed and replied that it was extremely obscene and she was taking them for herself. The protagonist said that she only needs him because she has poison in her system. The girl replied that she had such a low level of poison in her body. It only took her an hour to get it out of her system. She was just careless this time, and he shouldn't think she was weak. The protagonist, lying on the bed, thought that she was really stubborn and also closed his mouth. He was wondering if she could beat him. I also took my stockings. He hopes it's not because they're scary. He didn't know what kind of girl could refuse stockings. He also didn't understand what kind of other clans they were. Zhao Tekui didn't want to tell him too much. There is also this entry system, but it is somehow incomprehensible. It clouds his head. Immediately, the goddess appeared to the protagonist and he asked why she had come to him. He asked if the system could tell him what he needed. He needed to find out information about other clans, and asked her to tell him. Other clans are non-human races that exist in this world, They are usually called demons. 20 years ago, a protracted war broke out between the alien clans. In the end, the human race paid a heavy price, but drove out the alien clans and shut them down in 10 forbidden zones, which were guarded by 6 Huizhu clans and 4 Shenzong clans. Over time, the forces of the alien clans recovered and they tried to attack in order to return to their world. What they're facing today is just an alien race sneaking in. The protagonist noted that 10 forbidden zones is quite a lot. He also added that the 100% charge of his divine body is equivalent to what level? The goddess replied that the levels go from top to bottom: spirit, initial, impenetrable heart, tempered character, leader, emperor, deity, lord, immortal. There are 9 levels in total. The current capacity of the divine body is 13 units. The power at 100% charge is equivalent to the 5th level, the leader. The protagonist was surprised. He asked with fiery eyes if it was possible to increase his capacity and how to do it. The system reported that every time he completes a task, he gets points. These points can be exchanged for items, such as a container. 100 points are required for every 10 units of capacity. At the moment, he has 13 points, which can only be exchanged for books. He was surprised that the points could be exchanged for books and said that he needed an item that would make him stronger. Lan asked which book would be able to do this. He immediately thought about it and asked if any book could be bought, and the goddess was surprised. After that, he bought an adult book for men. He was reading it and charging. At the moment, he already had 95% charge. He laughed and noted that with this book he would be able to maintain his divine body at a constant level, as he could take it anywhere. Immediately, the protagonist's heart began to beat and he felt something. The protagonist looked out the window and saw the ninjas who were jumping over the gate to the temple. He noted that they were fine and thought it was the Xuan Giant clan. He looked at them and wondered why these idiots always sneaked in here in the middle of the night. Immediately, the system informed him that he would receive the 4th task. The protagonist was surprised, and the system informed him that he needed to specify a designated location to log in. Required time, 3 hours. The content of the task: to do adult business with the Empress. Completion reward, unknown. The penalty for failure is death. The protagonist was confused by the task and asked the system to tell him when he could do it. After that, we are shown a table of levels. The current was at the 3rd level, an impenetrable heart. The old woman at level 4 is a hardened character. Xiaoning and Xuaniao were of an unknown level. After that, they show us the Empress's palace, and there were already a lot of ninjas there. The protagonist followed them and noted that the defense was too weak and asked Zhao Tekui what they should do. Tekui was at home and looked at herself in the mirror and noted that she was very beautiful. After that, we are shown the square in front of the Empress's bedchamber. There was a statue there and it was guarded by 2 guards. Immediately, someone hit these 2 girls from behind. At this time, the protagonist knocked down the guard of the bedchamber. He noted that judging by the direction of movement of these people, the target should be the Empress's palace. As a guard, he needs to report to the Empress as soon as someone attacks. There is nothing wrong with the fact that while he is reporting this to her, he will accidentally fall and touch the Empress. The system told him that touching her didn't count as an adult thing, and the protagonist thought that he was a little genius. After a while, the protagonist was eavesdropping and did not understand why it was so quiet. He thought that these bastards had come before him. The protagonist opened the door and said that the guardian of the Jade clan was here and asked who dared to enter here. At that time, the Empress was lying in her chambers and the protagonist was shocked by her beauty that he even bled. The protagonist turned to her to tell her everything. He noted that she did not look well and thought that she had been poisoned or bewitched. Zhang turned around and saw that purple-tipped arrows were flying at them. With a wave of his hand, he deflected a couple of arrows and got into a fighting pose. The protagonist looked at the arrow and realized that it was poison from another clan. She is not from the Xuan Giant clan. It's an alien arrow. Immediately, the girl woke up and sighed. She saw a murky protagonist who said that these alien brutes were so brave. He didn't understand how they dared to infiltrate the Jade clan and make an attempt on the Empress. If they were from the Xuan Giant clan, he wouldn't have dared to kill them yet. But since these puppies are from another world, there's nothing to be offended about. Immediately, the Empress stood up and hugged the protagonist, which made him very scared and surprised. Xuaniao asked if he was comfortable and asked him to hold her tightly. The protagonist did not understand what was wrong with her and why her body was so hot. The protagonist was trying to pull the Empress away from him, and at that time the ninjas ran into the palace. One of them said that there were all 2 of them. The second one said that the Empress was really unconscious and needed to kill them. The third wanted the evil spirits to help them, because the fate of the clan is in their hands. The ninja was already near the protagonist, and Zhang, out of fear, shouted for the Empress to behave with dignity, because now was not the time, and Xuaniao asked if he wanted to do it. The ninja tried to hit the Empress with his sword, but Zhang managed to grab her and jump away. Immediately, the system congratulated him on completing the 4th task and receiving a mysterious gift bag. She asked if he wanted to take a look at her now. The protagonist grabbed the Empress and run away from the monsters, replied that now was not the right time. Asked the girl what those sounds were. She replied that the Empress's bedchamber had been attacked. She was surprised by this and used their Jade clan as a vegetable market and rushed to the palace with the other girls. Immediately, they all hit the protective purple dome. All the girls fell to the ground, and Xiaoning realized that outsiders had made their way into their clan, some high level in purple robes. She understood that being in the purple robe was equivalent to the level of a sovereign. But if the Empress was healthy, then it would not be difficult to deal with them, but she was afraid that she was too late. Immediately, the protagonist knocked out the wall and the Empress asked her to hold it tight, and Zhang Runaway noted that she was very loose now. Immediately, a black lightning bolt struck behind him, causing everyone to be surprised. The protagonist landed and noted that this kid was here and was still holding Xuanyao in his arms, and she was very pleased. It was an alien overlord in a purple robe, and he noted that it was strange that there were men in the Jade clan. He laughed and added that Zhang had almost interfered with their clan's business. The protagonist replied that he should not worry, because he would completely interfere with his plan. He noted that this kid is strong. It's not worth fighting with him. The problem was that the surroundings were still under the spell. He didn't know what to do. The protagonist handed over a scroll with his belongings. He understood that those women outside could no longer be counted on. He had to find another way. The master did not understand what kind of spell the protagonist was doing and whether it obscured the view. He didn't understand anything. He held out the scroll and shouted that it was him. The scroll began to envelop the Empress, and the protagonist said that it was translucent. This is the legendary one. Then the hedgehog began to glow, and the protagonist was just stunned, because he even shines through his clothes. He asked the system to get out of here. A goddess appeared next to him and wanted to say that he had something, but the protagonist got angry and asked what kind of crap she was constantly giving him. These boots they tore after the first run. The function of the translucent scroll is to make clothes transparent. He asked how about being completely transparent for 3 minutes. The protagonist's hands did not obey out of anger. He asked her. She bought all this on the street ruins for 2 yuan. The goddess was very angry and asked him to show respect. He said that if she wanted to help, she should let him open this gift. He'll even get down on his knees. The system replied that it was useless and threw it back. Immediately, the leader fired a purple ball at them. The protagonist got ready and said that he was not giving him time so that he could open his gift. Zhang hit the ball with his power and screamed. The system reported that the charge of the divine body has been reduced to 50%. The leader added that any actions before death are useless. A system prompt appeared where she asked if Zhang wanted to use the gift now. And at that time the protagonist was angry and replied that she should open it right now. Immediately, there was an explosion of purple and yellow energy. The leader was surprised that his power had been absorbed. The system congratulated him on obtaining an ancient magic weapon, the Giyan sword. This sword originally belonged to the human emperor Xuanyuan 3,000 years ago, and it can absorb the aura of heaven and earth, crushing demons. The head added that he had read about him in ancient books. The Giyan sword actually appeared in this world. He didn't understand how Zhang could end up in the hands of a worthless man like him. The protagonist asked what the hell he meant by worthless. He is totally worthy of it. The protagonist hit the ground and shouted that he was the defender of the Jade clan. The wave flew straight at the leader and he created a shield and asked with his cultivation base. He is still trying to harm him. Immediately, the protagonist's power penetrated the shield and destroyed the leader. The wave of force went on and destroyed the roof, and then she tore down the shield that the enemies had created, and the girls ran away, shouting at the girls, shouting for them to run and find the Empress. Immediately, they all saw Xuanyao. Xiaoning ran up to the Empress and burst out that she was fine, because she was so worried. Xiaoning also ordered the girls to destroy the remnants of the alien race, and they agreed. The Empress said that she almost went crazy when she was training, but now she doesn't remember exactly what happened. She asked what happened to the palace. Xiaonan asked if she didn't know who defeated the alien race. Xuanyao replied that she had vaguely seen the man who had saved her from a fatal blow. The Empress remembered the protagonist and wondered if it could be him. At this time, the protagonist was going home and his lower back was hurting. The power of this sword is too great. It felt as if his body had been emptied. The next day came after that. The Empress was sitting on the throne and Xiaoning said that the alien captives explained that she was saved by a mysterious man named Captain. Moreover, they said that the Giyan sword magic weapon, which had disappeared for thousands of years, was in his hands. She wondered if it was the descendants of the Xuanyuan clan. The Empress asked, but why did the man of the Xuanyuan clan appear here and why did he leave without saying goodbye? Xiaoning asked if it could be the same Zhang Lan. Should she take him to the prisoners to check? The Empress replied in denial, because since this man does not want to reveal himself, there is no need to force him. What worries her more is why an alien like the purple-robed high priest can bypass the defense line of the Forbidden Land and infiltrate the sect. Xiaoning replied that the disciples of the Xuanjian clan, whom they had chased away after they invaded the mountain gate a few days ago, had come to deliver a message. Alien races protected by other clans have also undergone changes. She's afraid they might be planning some big move. The Empress was curious. They had not been disturbed for several years. They dared to come to the mountain gate of her Jade clan and cause a frenzy. She has to give the order. Tomorrow she will personally go to Lingfeng Gorge. It's time for these alien races to experience the power of the Jade Goddess clan again. Xiaoning agreed with her and added that she and Tai Chui would take 30 good assistants each to accompany them. The Empress added that they didn't need so many people. Only the two of them could go with her, and she should also bring Zhang Lan.
After that, we are shown the Lingfeng Gorge. Night had already fallen and the Empress and her subordinates arrived, and all the girls knelt and greeted the master. We are introduced to the third student Ikai and the fourth student Kingling. The Empress told them to find out where the loophole was. Xiaoning asked the protagonist to stop, but Zhang felt sick because of the flight and threw up everything. The protagonist pretended to be a girl and said he was fine. He just got a little seasick and apologized. Xiaoning began to get angry and said that the local clan disciples still did not know that the man had joined the Jade Goddess clan. But the master asked him to accompany them. In order not to scare the students, she will allow them to be in women's clothes. The voice-altering spell is time-limited, so he doesn't have to beat around the bush. He should just show a little restraint and not create problems, and if he disobeys, he will regret it. The protagonist was afraid of her pressure and agreed with her. Zhang Lan did not understand what was going on and why the master had brought him here. He thought that she had already found out that he had broken into her bedroom that night. Kingling asked Xiaoning who this girl was. She replied that she was a new student of the master. She brought her here to gain experience. Immediately, the Empress called Xiaoning and she ran to her, and Kingling turned to the new girl. She began to examine her, and the protagonist was very confused. He didn't understand why Xiaoning had abandoned him and run away. He thought that he would definitely be exposed, and immediately the girl grabbed his hands. She said that it turns out that Zhang is their little sister, and she is her older named sister Kingling. She asked if this was her first time in Lingfeng Gorge and asked him to let her show her everything. Immediately, she dragged him along and said that they were all good sisters here, and the protagonist wanted to say something, but did not have time. After that, she said that Lingfeng Gorge is the protection of their clan from aliens. Thousands of miles of the Longmen Mountains stretch to the left and right, which even an eagle cannot cross, and only the middle canyon, which is no more than 100 meters wide, can be traversed. Over the millennia, the alien race has tried countless times to counterattack the Huazhu continent through this place, but all their attempts have ended in failure. The protagonist asked Kingling how the power level is distributed within the alien race. The girl replied that he had asked the right person. She was the best at questions about an alien race. In the alien race, the dominant one is the High Priest, who is good at spells. Their ranks vary in the color of their robes. From the strong to the weak there are red robes, yellow robes, white robes, blue robes, purple robes, and ordinary priests. Below the priests are ordinary aliens. They are good at physical skills, but their fighting power is not particularly outstanding. But they are good at riding beasts. There are all kinds of ferocious beasts in the desert. They are numerous and extremely powerful, and special care and vigilance are needed with them. The protagonist realized that it was no wonder that the power of the high priest he encountered on the mountain was so different from the power of the high priest who attacked the palace. It turns out that the priests also have a hierarchy. Kingling walked up to the large tent and noted that the protagonist would definitely like it here. Zhang noted that it was a very large tent and he was wondering what was inside. Kingling thought that she was tired from the journey and suggested taking a good bath and relaxing. Lingfeng Gorge is famous for its hot springs, and Zhang was surprised. The protagonist was confused and replied that he was not tired. Kingling started to undress and called the protagonist and told him to come in and wash his face while they chatted. The protagonist came to the exit and said that he seemed to hear the master calling him. Kingling grabbed the protagonist and asked him not to worry, because no one is calling him. She was already sitting on him and asked if he didn't want to wash with her, and the protagonist blushed with embarrassment. He understood that something was wrong. He thought that she had found out that he was a man or that she loved women. Kingling approached the protagonist and asked if she had hurt him, but she really liked him very much. The protagonist realized that she was a lesbian. A system prompt immediately appeared. The host gave him task number 5. Task category: Login. Time requirement within 3 days. The purpose of the task is to make Kingling heterosexual. Punishment, being crushed by 5 strong men. The protagonist said that the system had gone crazy, and this punishment is just cruel. He knew he had to stop her first. The protagonist asked her to wait a minute. First he has to confess one thing. Kingling stood up and asked if she didn't think she was pretty enough. The figure of the elder sister is one of the best in the Jade Goddess clan, and the protagonist was just shocked. He was bleeding from excitement and he realized that he still couldn't tell her that he was a man disguised as a woman. The girl laughed and noted that he said he was not interested, and as soon as she saw his body, her nose immediately bled. The protagonist thought he was finished. The girl stood up and said she would help him dry off. The protagonist covered himself and replied that he would do everything himself. Kingling noticed that something was wrong with his voice. Immediately, the protagonist ran out of the tent and shouted that the voice change spell was no longer working. Immediately, Kingling grabbed the protagonist with a ribbon and dragged him back. She grabbed him and threw him into the bathroom. The girl sitting in the water asked how he could fall asleep without taking a bath, while the protagonist, looking at the naked Kingling, was stunned. The girl approached him and grabbed his clothes and said that she would help him undress, and the protagonist asked not to touch him. Immediately, Kingling was surprised when she saw something. The protagonist's watermelons fell out of his clothes and he thought it was over. She grabbed and crushed the watermelon with a squeeze of her hand and noted that it was no wonder now that he refused to wash with her. Kingling hadn't realized yet that the protagonist was a guy and started crying and said it wasn't his fault that he had small breasts. She shouldn't be shy about it. The protagonist was shocked and noted that she knows how to draw interesting conclusions. The girl hugged the protagonist and asked him not to worry, because from now on no one will be able to laugh at him. Big Sister will always protect him. The protagonist got very excited and felt that he was at the top of his life. Immediately, the girl was very embarrassed. She pushed the protagonist away from her and looked down. She began to get very angry and asked what it was. Jiang made cute eyes and said that he wanted to explain it earlier, but didn't have time. Immediately, a strong explosion thundered into the tent and a huge ray flew out of the tent, and the girls were surprised. Ikai, Xiaoning and the Empress were surprised by the noise. Ikai felt an infuriating hesitation and thought that Kingling was in danger. Besides her, she doesn't feel any more hesitation and asked what happened to her, and the girls looked at the red ray. Xiaoning was confused and thought that the effect of the voice-changing spell had expired, and Ikai was at a loss. The protagonist appeared, who was running away from Kingling and asking for help. Immediately, another explosion thundered behind him and the protagonist flew forward. He fell into the camp and the girls screamed that the man was in the camp and were surprised, and the protagonist hit the rock. The system informed the protagonist that his current charge is 120%. A very angry Kingling was walking towards the protagonist and he thought that despite the fact that his body was about to explode, he could not harm this woman. The girl swung her weapon in a rage and shouted for him to die. Xiaoning immediately appeared, who blocked the blow near the protagonist and asked Kingling to stop. The girl shouted that he had deceived her because he was a man. Xiaoning knew this and added that she couldn't kill him. Kingling didn't understand why. The girl replied angrily that he was a servant whom the master had taken to guard the mountain gate. Kingling was surprised. She started shouting that there had never been any men in their Jade Goddess clan, and asked how they had allowed him to guard the mountain gate. Xiaoning whispered in Kingling's ear that the clan master had his own plans in this regard, and therefore she should not fool around. The girl agreed not to kill the protagonist, but as punishment, she would cut him a little and took out her blade, and Xiaoning was surprised. The protagonist did not understand what kind of wildness it was. She immediately ran after him and shouted for him to stop, and he asked her to calm down. The Empress immediately appeared and said that since Kingling was aware, she would not harm his life. Jiang Lan didn't follow the rules, and it was time to teach him a lesson. After that, she told Ikai to show her the distribution of the alien camps again, and the girl agreed. After that, the protagonist hid and using the system noted that this crazy woman did not understand how to calm her down. Immediately, a dagger flew at his feet, but he managed to bend and was scared. Kingling said that she hates men the most in her life and asked how dare he run away from her. For this, he will receive his punishment. The protagonist was very afraid and asked her to calm down. The protagonist took a pill and decided to try something. He immediately began to glow so much that the girl even had to cover herself with her hand. Kingling didn't understand what trick she was trying to pull off. The protagonist seemed very handsome to her and he asked her how she was doing. The girl blushed and did not understand why she felt strange. Immediately, she began to turn her head and tried to wake up. The girl got angry and said harshly that he would pay for it. The protagonist approached her and took her by the chin and asked what price he would have to pay. But the girl did not know what to say. She knew that something was wrong, because she was very excited and even covered herself from embarrassment. The protagonist hugged the girl and asked why she was in a hurry to leave, or she doesn't dare to meet his eyes, and the girl's legs give way. The girl was very embarrassed and blushed and asked the protagonist to leave because she can't stand it anymore. The protagonist understood that his charm had increased by 300%. It was really powerful, but he did not understand what to do next. He realized that he needed to read more novels. Jang thought about kissing her hard, hugging her tight, and going lower, but he didn't know where to start. Immediately, the protagonist hugged the girl and took hold of her waist. The girl screamed out of embarrassment so much that the protagonist was even surprised. Jang Lan noted that she had such a strong reaction, even though he just touched her waist. The girl pulled away and looked at the protagonist a little embarrassed. Kingling licked her lips and said that she would like to see what was so good about him. She knocked him to the ground and noted that if she dared to provoke her, he had to be prepared for her to squeeze all the juices out of him. The protagonist started shouting for her to stop. He understood that she was completely out of control. He doesn't know if she's going to break his pickle. She obviously changed her orientation, but the task was not completed. Immediately, the girl grabbed his pants and told him to take them off. The protagonist blushed and resigned himself to saying that he tried his best. Immediately, the girl stopped and fell silent, and the protagonist was surprised. She got very angry and asked what he had done to her. The protagonist began to cry and did not understand why the pill stopped working at this stage. The girl created a weapon and shouted that she would cut them into pieces. Jang asked out of fright if she was going to kill him. Immediately, the girl's legs became stiff, just like the whole body. She started to take off and Kingling shouted to be let go, and Jang was surprised. The girl turned and saw Xiaoning and Ikai. She asked her sister to let her go because she had to kill him. Xiaoning noted that he really changed Kingling's orientation. She was very interested. Ikai noted that Kingling was humiliated, and therefore asked why she saved this man. She replied that if Kingling changed her orientation, then every disciple of their clan would be able to cultivate with peace of mind, without worrying about Kingling harassing her. She found Jang Lan very useful. Although the protagonist did not hear what they said, he always feels when he is praised. After that, it was early morning and they showed us the camp. The protagonist was sleeping in a tent and coming out of it noted that he was fine. He understood that it was obvious that the charge had reached 120% last night and had not been released. His current remaining energy is 100%. But after sleeping, not only did his body not explode, but his charge dropped to 100%. He didn't understand if the energy had been lost or if his storage capabilities had expanded. Immediately, he turned his attention to the girl who was sitting on the rock behind him. It was Kingling, who was very angry and clutched rocks and popped them. The protagonist laughed nervously and said that he would probably go to the hut. He knew that he must not fall into her hands, otherwise she would tear him apart. Shonen immediately appeared and grabbed the protagonist and told him not to move, but he was surprised. They flew on a sword and he asked her where they were going. The girl told him not to ask what he shouldn't ask. She doesn't know what he did to Kingling, but if he was able to change her sexual orientation, it could be considered a great achievement. The protagonist thought about it and thought that they also want to change Kingling's orientation. She added that Kingling has a strong temperament, and if she really goes berserk, he might not be able to stop her. If he is in danger, he can directly seek help from the clan master. Immediately, the protagonist looked at the beautiful empress, who was also heading forward. He blushed and noted that there are countless beauties in the Jade Goddess clan, but the real incomparable beauty is still the clan master. Immediately, the system informed him that it was giving him a task to log in. Time requirement within 1 day. The purpose of the task, Master Xuaniao must put on the JK uniform. Reward for completion, unknown. Punishment, 10,000 arrows piercing the heart. The protagonist was confused by this information. He even started to panic and seemed to turn into a dog. After that, we are shown a certain alien citadel. There were big monsters working at full speed, and they were beaten with whips. Immediately, the Empress said that alien bugs dare to leave the Forbidden Land without permission and disturb the peace. The monsters were shocked by her. There were already other girls around the Empress who were using their powers. She added that today, the army of her Jade Goddess clan went on a campaign to avenge this. The girls launched all their techniques directly at the monsters, from which some could only run away. Kingling was still furious and dealt with the monsters with cruelty. The protagonist saw all this, how she screamed at monsters and killed them, and he noted that this girl scares him. Shonen said that the largest food center of the alien race on the front line was destroyed by them. It definitely exceeds their expectations, and they will definitely calm down for a while. The protagonist didn't know if it was unexpected. The alien race did not know that the clan master would be angry. Couldn't they have predicted it? Zhang Lan asked if there was a possibility that this place was actually a trap, and Xiaoning was surprised. The Empress was immediately surprised and asked again. Xiaoning said that Jean Lan reminded her, an alien race attacking their clan couldn't help but expect them to strike back. This citadel is closest to the front line and is also a food center. She did not understand how the alien race could not take defensive measures and let them attack. She figured there must be something wrong here. Kingling flew up to them and said that Xiaoning was too trusting. All this was coming from the mouth of a liar, and she didn't understand how she could believe his nonsense. The protagonist replied that he was just being careful. The situation is really a bit strange. It's better to retreat first, and then think over a long-term plan. Kingling flew into battle and shouted that it was just ridiculous. They know how valuable this food is for aliens. Whether it's a trap or not, they'll find out after they activate it. She flew forward and destroyed the men and screamed at them to go to hell. The protagonist was a little afraid, because he understood that it was all about personal resentment. Immediately, Kingling opened the door and the guard even flew away. She noted that there were so many food bags, but she had a feeling that they were filled with sand. The monster guard accidentally pierced the bag with his horn and there really was sand inside, which surprised her greatly. At this time, Xiaoning turned around and asked why there was a sandstorm here at this time. The protagonist looked up and noted that this was an even bigger problem, and Xiaoning was very surprised. Huge meteorites like Madaras were falling from the sky. Kingling noted that all the food had been moved, and it was dangerous. Immediately, she was caught in a sandstorm and screamed. The Empress created a shield with the other students and she shouted not to retreat and form a defensive line. Xiaoning told the master that it was worth leaving the attack area first. The Empress noted that it was useless, the coverage area was too wide. If they moved, they would only suffer heavy losses. She asked where Zhang Lan was, and Xiaoning turned around and hoped that he had not fallen down. At this time, the protagonist used 10% of the energy to fly. He had been telling them for a long time that they needed to leave, but they wanted to stay and wreak havoc. Now he had to sort out their mess. First, they used a normal-sized meteor to surprise the enemy. Then they used a sandstorm to limit visibility. And then they dropped a giant meteor unnoticed. He noted that monsters are calculating, but he was sorry that they had miscalculated his existence, and he decided to strain himself and release 90% of the energy. And with one blow, he destroyed the meteorite. After that it was over and he was in shock. He began to fall, because all his energy was used up. Immediately, someone picked up the protagonist. It was the Empress, and she asked if he had destroyed that huge fiery meteor. He was very embarrassed, because the Empress was holding him, and the girl was surprised. Immediately, the system reported that it was 100% charged very quickly. A moment later, they lowered it down and Xiaoning flew up to them and told the Empress that Kingling was missing and she had probably been kidnapped. And she has just received a signal for help from the camp. The main forces of the alien race are attacking the camp. The Empress noted that this act of the alien race really opened her eyes. If they return to the camp, they won't be able to save Kingling. She added that she would stay and save Kingling, and they should return to the camp. The protagonist said that this time the alien race was well prepared, and even if the deputy clan master caught up with them, she could become a target and fall into the hands of the enemy. He suggested that the safest solution would be to send someone they have only known for a short time. The Empress was surprised and understood his thought. The Empress, entering the house, called the protagonist to follow her, and he smiled maliciously. After that, they were already inside and she said that she did not know why he was hiding his power, but it was difficult to hide it from her eyes. She asked if he had saved her in her bedroom that night. The protagonist noted in embarrassment that she was wise and did not think that she would find out. The Empress noted that his strength was superior to Lu Xuning's, so she could be sure that he would save Kingling, and also realized that he was the one who saved her that night. Immediately, the protagonist began to fall and Xuaniao asked what was wrong with him. The protagonist was embarrassed by the sight of the Empress and said that this trick with the meteor had exhausted all his energy. He had no strength left. She asked how long it would take to restore his energy. The protagonist replied that the exercises he was practicing were very peculiar, and it was not difficult to recover, but he needed her help. The protagonist handed her clothes and told her to put them on, and he would be able to recover in a second, even if only a drop of blood remained from him. The Empress noted that these clothes were curious, neither linen nor silk, and did not understand what material they were made of. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter, she had to wear it, and that was it. The girl started to get a little angry and asked if wearing this skirt could restore his strength. And he really thinks she's an idiot. The protagonist swore that he wasn't lying. These clothes seem ordinary, but in fact they hide a mysterious power. As long as she wears it, she can channel the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body. After a while, she will feel his inner strength and make sure that it is true. The girl thought about it, because since he appeared, he helped them at critical moments, so there shouldn't be any bad thoughts. Besides, she just needs to change her clothes. She's not risking anything, but she blushed a little. The girl said that time was running out, so she would trust him, but only this time. He should also turn away. She will let him know when he finishes changing clothes. The protagonist turned around and agreed with her. After that, the girl behind the bags began to undress. She didn't understand why this shirt was so tight and this skirt was too short. The protagonist replied that these magical clothes must be different from the usual ones. After a moment, the Empress told Zhang that he could turn around, and he agreed with her with a lustful look. Xuaniao looked just incredible, and she noted that it was some kind of strange style. The protagonist immediately covered his banana and was shocked. The system congratulated the protagonist on completing the 6th task. Immediately, the protagonist literally caught fire with power, and the Empress felt a powerful force and realized that he was telling the truth. A huge beam appeared from that house, and it was a crazy upgrade. The system told him that a professional crazy heart was installed. The capacity of the divine body has been increased to 2,000 units, which is equivalent to the 9 heavens stage after 100% charging. The protagonist told her to provide kindling to him. He would return her in one piece. After that, we are shown an ominous alien cave where there were many monsters. There were guards inside and a suspended kindling. The protagonist found her. The locator that he bought with the help of system points is really useful. It was a female locator. The cost is 4 points, and the current balance is 16 points. After that, monsters came into the room, and one said that his master was really smart and had achieved excellent results. This woman has killed countless of his children, and this time he can finally take revenge. When she wakes up, he'll let the boys line up and have a good time with her, and they can throw it into the desert to feed the wolves. The other laughed and asked that they had such an opportunity, and he just wanted revenge, so it was not surprising that their race ended up in this hole. The head immediately got angry, and the other said that if the master had any plans, they could implement them. He said that for thousands of years, the Jade Goddess clan had been able to prevent them from crossing Lingfeng Gorge. This is not because they are powerful, but because of the core of the guardian spirit placed in the gorge. The core of the guardian spirit is designed to suppress aliens, and as soon as an alien enters its sphere of influence, the power of any alien is significantly reduced. The monsters noted that this was true. They tried countless ways to destroy the core, but they could not. He noted that the core of the guardian spirit is the biggest obstacle to the revival of their clan. The gentleman replied that they would have the opportunity to destroy him, as long as he uses a spell to control Kingling's mind. They should let her come back and destroy the spiritual core. The head noted that this was a wonderful plan and did not understand why he did not think about it. His son replied that when it comes to guile and cunning, the human race is not their equal, and this gentleman is indeed the savior of their race. The protagonist overheard all this and realized that it was a good trick to get her to do everything herself. Now it is clear who led the tactics of the alien race. To use a human to help an alien race, he considered him a scumbag. The head said that we need to do this together and cast a spell. Immediately, dark energy began to penetrate the girl. The protagonist, creating fireballs in his hands, noted that the spell is very expensive. He can't miss such a precious opportunity. He immediately put the abilities right into their spell. Everyone was surprised and did not understand what was happening, and at that time everything began to be destroyed. They also thought that the Jade Master was here. Immediately, the head noticed that Kingling had escaped. The monster said it was impossible. She was injured and couldn't recover her strength in 3 hours. Someone took her away. Someone took her away. It's definitely not a Jade Master, it's just a mouse that snuck in. He shouted for them to block all exits and search. The protagonist quickly ran away with Kingling. The girl asked why it was him. She doesn't want him to save her. The protagonist asked, is this a joke? Why does he need her consent to do what he wants? Immediately, he saw in front of him a huge worm with one eye and a huge mouth. He stopped immediately. Zhang unleashed his power on him and shouted at him to go to hell. Immediately, everything began to collapse and he was surprised. They began to fall down and he realized that this mountain was too fragile. After that, they show us the dungeon. The protagonist broke through the ceiling and fell down. The girl flew after him and the protagonist looked at the top and got a little excited. She landed right on his face and he felt great. Kingling immediately stood up and noted that it was quite painful. The protagonist was lying on the floor and Kingling asked why his nose was bleeding and if he was injured. The protagonist was happy and replied that he was fine. The monsters from above shouted that the protagonist had fallen down and they had to report to the high priest. Kingling noted that this was not good, because they had already been discovered. Jiang grabbed the girl's hand and said that everything was fine. There were many passages in this cave. It would not be so easy to find them. The protagonist walked forward and did not understand where this light was coming from, and why this cave was green and bright. She looks really creepy. Kingling asked if they would find a way out. The protagonist looked into the room and was surprised. It was the place where the ancient ancestors of the alien race rest. The protagonist thought that they had fallen into someone's ancestral grave. Immediately, the system congratulated him. He arrived at the secret location of the mission. He receives a reward, Xuan Tian Dan Dian. The download to the brain has also begun. She noted that it is not advisable to stay here for a long time and they should leave. Immediately the download was completed. He assured the mastery of the knowledge of Xuanchen Dan Dian. The protagonist had a headache and the girl asked what was the matter. Jiang turned around and replied that everything was fine. The system has hammered so many things into his head. He's afraid he's going to become schizophrenic because of it. The protagonist asked if she was so worried about him and she didn't fall in love with him. The girl was confused and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking. She said that the smelly man's brain is really abnormal. She will ignore him. From now on, he shouldn't bother her. Then she noticed that the protagonist did not follow her. Kingling returned and asked why he still wasn't leaving. The protagonist took the bone and replied that he knew why this whole cave was glowing green. The remains of these alien ancestors are high-quality medicinal materials. In the alchemical writings, they are called the bones of the soul. The light in the cave is the spiritual energy that these soul bones have lost over the years. Immediately, the monsters noticed them and ran after Kingling. The girl ran up to the protagonist and the monsters said that they could not arbitrarily enter the tomb of the ancestors and they had to leave. The head asked how they dared to break into the tomb of their ancestors. It's not enough to tear him to pieces. The protagonist replied that he advises them not to act rashly. This place is full of spiritual energy, and if he casts a fireball spell, the head knows what the consequences will be. The head shouted at him not to fool around, because they can come to an agreement. If they have any requirements, just specify them and they guarantee their fulfillment. The monster told the others to prepare to kill them with ranged spells. The protagonist asked Kingling how she thought the fireball would take care of them, and she was shocked. Immediately, the protagonist began to panic violently and got scared. The head started screaming, and the monster felt sorry for the ancestors. The protagonist bent his finger and stopped the ball, saying that he was just joking and they should not be nervous. All the monsters breathed a sigh of relief and said that he had scared them and it was not bad. The protagonist turned and a fireball slipped out of his hand, and the monsters were surprised again. The head even tensed up a lot and began to panic. The ball flew straight into the dice and Kingling asked. This time he was also joking. But the protagonist replied in denial and was very scared. Jiang told the system to put all the soul bones in the vault. She said that permission to store foreign objects is not currently included. If he needs to activate it, he needs to pay for a subscription. 3 points for a monthly subscription, 30 points for an annual subscription, 50% discount for new customers. The promotion is limited. Total, 15 points. The protagonist was just in shock. After a moment, the system began to suck all the bones into the vault. He was delighted, because the system managed to save everything and the fireball did not destroy anything. The protagonist said that now they can stop worrying. He grabbed Kingling and shouted that it was time for them to run, and the monsters wanted to kill them. They quickly rushed into the tunnel. The head decided to use the dark forces and shouted at them to stand. Jiang Lan created a fireball and wanted to use it in the chapter, and Kingling told him not to fight them. The protagonist shot a ball into the tunnel so that it began to collapse, but the magic of the head of the monsters got into the protagonist's body and pierced him. Immediately, the tunnel collapsed and blocked the entrance. The head managed to move away, but was angry that he had missed them. Another monster caught up with the head and noted that they had gone into this cave, but there was no way out, so the curse would torture him to death. The protagonist fell to the floor and said that the curse was really terrible. It had a penetrating effect and caused severe pain. Kingling approached him and noted that the white-robed priest's magic attack was very strong and defensible. Ordinary people die from it, but it will survive. Immediately, the protagonists realized that they were at a dead end, and they needed to clear the blockage and get out. However, he must first find a way to contain the curse. The protagonist asked the girl how her body was recovering. She seemed to be trying to seduce him and replied that she was fine. The protagonist blushed at the sight of the girl and asked again. Kingling was excited and replied that she was fine, she was just thinking. After that, everyone else ran up to them and they began to create a huge seal. The head said that this blockage of basalt stone is extremely durable and will weaken the effect of their spells, so they should use all their strength. The monster wanted them to bleed to death through 7 holes today. At this time, Kingling hugged the protagonist's legs and he replied in embarrassment that now was not the time for that. Those aliens outside must be fooling around, they need to figure out a way to get out of here quickly. And Kingling asked him not to leave. Immediately, he came up with the idea that he could use these soul bones to clear. The girl knocked him to the floor and said that this little cutie would not be able to escape. She approached his face and asked if he could help her, because she feels so awkward, and the protagonist was trying to restrain himself. She took his hand and put it on her hip. Then he looked at her beautiful body. Zhang couldn't stand it anymore. This part is really her sensitive spot and she took the initiative to let him touch her, and no one will be able to bear it. She moved even closer to him and said his name, preparing to kiss him. There was an immediate impact. She was hit on the neck and lost consciousness. He panicked and noted that it was so close that he almost couldn't hold back. He also noticed that although they say that men cannot restrain themselves, but real men should not use a girl to their advantage. He apologized to her, but it was the only way to calm her down. The system reported that its current charge is 180%, and it should release energy immediately. The protagonist asked her not to worry. As soon as he unearths the blockage, he will immediately release her. Just 1% of the soul bones is enough and return them through the portal. He used his power and irradiated himself with the power of bones. The head was eavesdropping and noted that there was no movement and thought that they were already dead. He examined the stones and invited them to clear the blockage and come in to look, and at this time they began to heat up and turn red. A moment later, there was a strong explosion and all the monsters scattered like stones. The monster said they were out and needed to be attacked. All the remaining ones used their powers on them, but the protagonist went ahead with Kingling and asked them if they still use curse attacks and assured them that this trick was completely useless in front of their ancestors' defenses. The monster did not understand how this was possible, because all their attacks were reflected. Zhang added that it took less than 30% of energy to refine these 2 sets of armor. He's still holding back. He started creating a huge fireball with the words that now he would have to create a problem for all of them in order to throw out the rest. The head started to panic, because this is the grave of his ancestors, and asked if he could leave everything as it is.
It was the same monster and he came with a white flag. He came with peaceful intentions. He wants to see the Empress of the Jade Goddess clan. He was outside the camp. The girls were standing on a rock and Shonen thought it was strange, and asked if the aliens really wanted to beg for mercy. The Empress noted that they were scared by Zhang Lang and might have thought that they had invented an artifact that could withstand their spells. Xiaoning should take the monster to the camp and call Zhang Lan, and she agreed. After that, he was in the main hall and Kingling shouted that he dared to come to their camp alone and asked if he wanted to destroy the core of the guardian spirit. The monster started to panic and replied that it was all a misunderstanding. They once insulted the Jade Goddess clan. He asks to forgive their mistakes and spare their clan. Outside the camp there are 30 wagons with blue crystals, which are a piece of his family's heart. He also asks the Empress to accept them. Shoning thought that the blue crystal is a rare ore that is native to an alien race. It is very useful for cultivation. The entire Jade Goddess clan only has a few pounds of this ore. The aliens really sent so many. It's a lot of money, and the Empress was thinking. The protagonist immediately appeared and thought that he wanted to buy his life for this piece of garbage. He asked if he really thought they were that poor. Kingling was surprised, because after she pumped him with a special fragrance, he had to sleep at least until tomorrow. She did not understand why he woke up quickly and assumed that he had not slept at all. The protagonist went ahead and said that if they want to survive, they must first expose the person behind all these. Also, tell them clearly how the alien team that tried to kill the Empress bypassed Ling Feng. The monster began to panic. Xiaoning was surprised and thought that Zhang was right. These are the most important issues for the Jade Goddess clan. She was almost fascinated by the blue crystals and found Zhang Lan to be very reserved. The monster said in a panic that he only knew that this man called himself Min, and he never revealed his true identity, nor did he talk about his identity and origin. He led them in search of a secret road 30 miles west of Lingfeng Gorge, along which they were able to pass through the Longmen Mountains. The protagonist put a finger with a fireball to his head and asked where he was now. The monster replied that when Zhang came to rescue Kingling, he immediately disappeared. He did not know where he had gone. The protagonist asked if he was a man or a woman. The monster replied in a panic that it was a man and he was sure of it. Zhang Lan thought about it. Then the possibility of traitors appearing in the Jade Goddess clan could be ruled out. He wondered who it could be. After that, Xiaoning and the Empress discussed Zhang Lan and said that he was really talented. Since the alien race did not give out the mine, he blackmailed 10 more wagons of blue crystals. When Kingling destroys the secret path and returns, they must give them a decent reward and we can return to the clan. Immediately, Xiaoning said that there was good news. Zhang Lan cured Kingling's attraction. She asked if she noticed how Kingling was looking at Zhang Lan. She didn't want to kill him at all, but instead to do something else. Immediately, the Empress looked back with a slightly malicious look. The Empress turned away and Xiaoning was confused and did not understand what she had said wrong, and why she suddenly turned around. After that, they show us the training room. The protagonist was lying on the rocks and did not know if this blue crystal could help in cultivation. He just wanted to help them lure out 10 more cards, but they were so happy that they were speechless. He really doesn't understand these cultivators. The system informed them that it would give them the task for entry number 7. The purpose of the task: to force the next person who enters the training room to put on an old uniform. The uniform was placed in storage. Time requirement: within 3 days. Completion reward: unknown. Punishment: death by lightning strike. The protagonist thought it would be fun this time. The protagonist felt that someone was coming towards him and wondered what kind of little cutie it would be. It was Ikai who entered the room. Zhang Lan thought it would be a piece of cake. She can't see anything anyway, so he'll just find a reason to trick her into wearing it. The girl sat down and began to undress, and the protagonist was shocked and covered his bottom. The protagonist realized that now that it had come to this, no matter what, he couldn't let her know that he was here, otherwise he was finished. He hadn't expected this at all. The protagonist began to panic and decided to escape before she noticed. Immediately, the girl heard a sound and lifted the bandage from her ear a little. She used her power from her finger and asked who was here, but the protagonist managed to dodge. Zhang felt that this girl was too fierce. He can't move, even if he dies, she shouldn't see him. She thought it was her imagination and continued to take off the blindfold. And the protagonist was just shocked. Her eyes were very shiny and white. Looking at her, the protagonist was surprised and did not understand. She really did not see at all. Such beautiful eyes, and he was sorry. The Empress entered the tent and asked Ikai to come out for a while. The girl turned around and was surprised. Ikai quickly dressed and agreed with the master. And the protagonist turned to the wall and asked the Empress not to look at him. Ikai left. The Empress went to the protagonist, and he, in turn, crept to the exit. She was a little angry and said that even though Ikai looks harmless, she cultivates the unity of heart and sword. The sword that dominates the world. If he dares to provoke her again, he must not think that she will be able to save him. The protagonist didn't know what to say. Then she sat down and asked him to sit next to her, because she needed to know something about his opinion, and the protagonist was delighted. After that, she told him that he should also know that the Jade Goddess clan is one of the 6 clans. Since most of the members of her sect are women, the other 5 sects often harass them. News has just arrived that the annual Martial Arts Improvement Conference of the 6 clans will be held in 3 days. This is an opportunity for the outstanding students of each clan to learn from each other, as well as an occasion to test the strength of each clan. He was also punished for peeping and hit on the head. But now all the best students are either in seclusion or guarding the clan, and only Ikai and Chichui's student will be able to participate. The Jade Goddess clan has been at the bottom of the rankings for 3 years in a row, and it will be unpleasant if it happens again this year. She is afraid that they are about to drop out of the list of 6 clans. The protagonist asked, "Isn't it unnecessary to put the 3 best students in the guard? She can take one of them with her." She replied that he would understand when he saw them in the future that they were not easy to take away from the mountain gate. The conference was suddenly postponed, and she can't wait for the senior student to finish her seclusion. After thinking about it, she is afraid that there is only one solution. After that, we are shown the top of the Lingyun clan. The protagonist disguised himself as a girl, and someone noted that the Jade Goddess clan master Zheng Chuaniao. Participating students Yichai, Zhang Lan, and Zhao Tichui arrived. The head noted that Xuaniao is here and she can sit down. A girl from this temple showed them their seats and asked them to sit down and laughed. Xuaniao and Tekui began to get angry. The latter shouted and asked what it all meant. He makes them sit in a corner, and they also put up a broken table. The protagonist intervened and said that he had long heard that the Lingyun clan's finances were limited. They had some difficulties. They really look poor. Fortunately, they brought their own tables and chairs so they can all sit down. The protagonist spent points on the presidential luxury table, and the head was surprised. The protagonist pulled back a chair and asked the Empress to sit down. Initially, the enemy clans wanted to disgrace the Jade Goddess clan, but they got dirty in the shit. The guy stood up and shouted that they shouldn't be sitting there. The head replied that everything was fine, and he could just ignore them. He didn't care how happy they were tonight, it was just a bluff. When the competition starts tomorrow, there will be a good show. After that, the morning came and the conference on improving the martial arts of the 6 clans begins. They show us a martial arts field. In the first round, the Wangxiangzong clan will fight the Jade Goddess clan. A disciple of the Wangxiangzong clan, Lin Qingyun, and a disciple of the Jade Goddess clan, Ikai. The head asked Xuaniao that this Zhang Lan was only here to replace another student. If they can't send a decent student, then they could just refrain. He didn't understand why bother fighting when they were going to lose. Lin and Ikai were already facing each other. The judge added that the winner of this round automatically moves on to the next round. Until all 3 of the same clan lose, the battle will not end. They need to improve and learn from each other, not harm anyone's life, and they can start. The protagonist was surprised that Lin was fighting in armor, because this opponent's position is too unequal. Taekui replied that they practice cruel and unusual foreign kung fu. Compared to them, their advantages cannot be fully exploited. Ikai immediately released her power into him right from her fingers. Lin deftly dodged the best girl. And Taekui added that they said that the rivals are determined by lot, but they fight the Wangxiangzong clan every year, and asked if he thought it was strange. The protagonist noted that even such a ferocious sword aura could not penetrate this armor. Taekui said that all their armor is made of high-quality ore. She can't directly attack him in the head. It really makes it harder to win. Lin tried to hit her, but Ikai dodged. She immediately started attacking him and added that aiming at the same point and continuous attacks, no matter how strong the armor was, he could still be defeated. It seems to her that Ikai has come up with a way to restrain the enemy. Immediately, Ikai began to feel dizzy. Taekui realized that her rivals were using vertigo stones to interfere with Ikai's hearing. Lin hit Ikai right in the face and she flew backwards. She flew out of the arena and ran towards her sister. The head said that there is no chance of losing here and that the Wangxiangzong clan wins in the first round. Lin asked who was next and quickly. Taekui was very angry and the second round began. She decided to do it and rushed forward. She shouted that in order to win, they were using insidious methods. Lin, dodging her hammer, said that with such skills, he asked if the Jade Goddess clan should still be among the 6 clans. He's ashamed of her. She was just furious with his words and told him not to dare to say such a thing. She hit him with all her might, but he decided to take the hit. The hammer immediately began to crack. A moment later, the hammer collapsed and the girl flew up. Ikai had already regained consciousness and only managed to shout the name of Taekui. The judge said that the Jade Goddess clan had lost 2 rounds in a row and asked if they wanted to continue. And Ikai was very angry. Zhang told Yichai to take the flow down and rest, and leave the rest to him. The head started to get angry and said that he was suggesting that they refrain and save the Jade Goddess clan from further disgrace. One of his students defeated them all. It would be too embarrassing if this spread. Lin said that a nobody like him shouldn't impose his presence. Also, so that he doesn't think he can win with a little ingenuity like yesterday. He must bow down and get out of here, otherwise he will destroy it with his steel fist. The protagonist noted that he was so funny, because he added a strengthening talisman to his hand. Being a bitch and putting on airs is so shameless. Lin got angry and rushed forward, telling him to shut up, because he was finished. The head asked Lin not to finish too quickly, because he had to save the Jade Goddess clan from further ridicule. The protagonist immediately hit Lin and he flew up. Zhang told her to stop bragging, because he hadn't lost yet. The Supreme God was here, and he asked who would dare to act rashly. And the head's face changed to the dog's face, which was shocked. The head did not understand how this was possible, because Lin Qingyun, the best disciple of the Wangxiangzong clan, could not fight back against the girl. He asked if the Jade Goddess clan really had such a cruel cultivation technique. The protagonist noted that he took him down with 1 punch and it was too cool. The system reported that there were 2/3 remaining glove uses. The head was angry and shouted that Lin was an idiot, because he relaxed after winning 2 rounds and Qin Fu should follow. Qin Fu from the Wangxiangzong clan jumped onto the field. He was here, the consummate Qin Fu, the invincible Hot Wheel. The most terrible thing about this movement is that it concentrates all the power in the arms and legs. Combined with its extremely high speed, it can be called a deadly weapon. Qin Fu once used this technique to break through 100 miles of alien races and kill countless enemies. No one knew how Zhang Lan would handle him. The protagonist just hit again and Qin Fu flew up. Zhang noted that the technique is good, but some other time. The Empress laughed sweetly and apologized, because her student is a little cruel, and the head shouted for Siluo to kick his ass. The fat man noted that Zhang is really capable, and his punches are so strong that it is really difficult for ordinary students to resist. But he is sorry that he met him. Another head was surprised when he saw the undefeated golden boy Siluo. The head of the Wangxiangzong clan agreed. The invincible kung fu of the golden body of Siluo is unique, and even he is not sure that he can defeat him when he defends with all his might. Silhouette growled and used the force. The head thought it was great. As long as they had Silhouette, the Wangxiangzong clan would be invincible. The protagonist hit the fat man and was surprised that it didn't work and didn't understand if such a technique actually exists. The head and the fat man laughed, and the old man said that his attacks were useless. Immediately, Silhouette began to shake and he spat out a lot of blood and lost all his health. He fell to the floor and trembled. And the protagonist turned around and asked if he had won, and the judge agreed. The Jade Goddess clan wins the first battle. The head seemed to faint from all this. In the second battle, the Lizong clan will come together against the Xuanjian clan. After that, the protagonist was in the guest bedroom and noted that the watermelons were very heavy and he did not understand how these busty girls survive. Immediately, a girl looked into the protagonist's room and called Zhang. It was Tekui who put on tights and asked what he thought of her improved tights. The protagonist blushed and replied that it was very good. Zhang noted that the energy changes there seemed so familiar. He thought of something. Tekui said that they had successfully moved forward thanks to his hard work. Tonight he can rest as much as he wants. When she turned around, she saw that the protagonist was missing. After that, they show us the Empress's room. The protagonist realized that it had happened again, in the territory of the Lingyang clan. He knew that it would be unpleasant if they found out, so he would have to act, and he blushed. The protagonist came up to her and the girl grabbed him and asked him to hold her tighter. Zhang couldn't help himself and said she could do whatever she wanted. He asked the system to act. Zhang asked why the Empress was so dependent on him after she was put under a spell, and he suggested that the divine body could neutralize her pain. The goddess asked for time to stretch. After she agreed, the power of the Jade Goddess cultivated by the Empress is an ancient divine art. It is charming. If you are careless, its skills may be lost. In the worst case, its body will be destroyed. The protagonist asked what he could do to help her. Is there any panacea that can be exchanged for points? The goddess replied that if he wanted to save her, it was very simple and he didn't need anything to do it. The divine body contains a lot of yang, and the power of the Jade Goddess contains a lot of yin. If he wants to completely heal the damage caused to her by the power of the Jade Goddess and help her overcome it, there's only one way. He would have to do double cultivation with her, which shocked him. The system asked him if he had made a decision. Only double cultivation could save her. If he hesitated, she might die. The protagonist took the Empress in his arms and went forward. He carefully placed her on the bed and the system noted that he had made the right decision. She decided to provide him with technical support. She wanted to say something to him, but the protagonist had already started doing it and the system was surprised and asked what he was doing. Zhang said that although he was not a righteous man, men should not take advantage of others. Since the biggest danger is the golden core, he will fix it. The system was surprised by his words and noted that after that his strength would be exhausted. Once the divine body is exhausted, it will take at least 12 hours to recover. During this time, he won't be able to do anything. So how will he participate in tomorrow's competition? After it was over, Xuaniao woke up and was even surprised that she was still alive. She didn't understand why her damaged golden core had also recovered and assumed that it was the protagonist who helped her again. At that time, Zhang was already behind his room. He asked the system why it didn't mention that the cost of energy depletion is kidney pain. The goddess replied that he deserved it. Such a beautiful woman was sent to his doorstep, but he did not want it and called him an idiot. The protagonist noted that he had done nothing and asked why she was angry. He thought she had some indescribable fetishes and liked to watch others. The goddess replied in denial and assured that she did not have any fetishes. He was talking nonsense and she would ignore him. When he entered the room, he thought that there was definitely something wrong with this system. She was tempted to all kinds of uniforms and she always wanted to drive him into different situations. Ikai was sitting inside his room, who immediately asked where he had been. The protagonist replied that he had a stomachache and went to the toilet. He asked why she was looking for him. The girl got up and went straight to him, saying that he had worked hard today, and thanks to him they had succeeded. She just came to remind him that tomorrow's final would consist of 3 melee matches. They are definitely in the spotlight. He must do everything in his power, but ensuring his own safety is a top priority. The protagonist agreed with her. He was surprised, because Ikai was asking him to fight for the honor of the clan, but reminded him that safety is above all. She immediately asked him to wait a minute. She turned around and asked why his body odor was so familiar. Zhang started to panic and replied that maybe it was the incense used in the bathroom. He also understood that this was bad, because it was the fragrance of the Empress. The protagonist tried to move away and stumbled and fell to the floor. She approached him and asked him not to move, because it was so familiar, as if she had felt this smell for 3 long years. She started sniffing him and the protagonist realized that he had to quickly change the subject. The girl began to untangle her ribbon and added that she hoped he could really help her. The protagonist was surprised, because he was just joking, and then the hedgehog blushed. They show us the beautiful Ikai without a bandage again. and Zhang replied that there was no problem with that. After that, the protagonist told her to look up and left, but she didn't see anything. She closed one eye and said she couldn't see anything anyway. The protagonist stood at the sign and realized that she was not blind. She just has high-level myopia. Ikai came closer to the board and began to see something. The protagonist asked the system if it had glasses for Ikai. He will spend a few points to buy them. The goddess clearly replied in denial, but Zhang realized that she was still angry. The feelings of this system are too realistic. The protagonist said that he was very sorry because he was going to cure her eyes first, and then ask her to put on a uniform. Since the goddess said no, she will have to wear it blindfolded, which is a pity, she has such beautiful eyes. Immediately, the system asked him to wait and after a moment gave him the glasses. He understood that even though this system is a woman, it looks like a perverted old man. When he knows what she likes, he can easily negotiate with her. The protagonist said that he was going to put something on her and asked her not to move, and Ikai was surprised. After that, he smiled broadly and asked how she saw. The girl was shocked and blushed from what she saw. She thought it was amazing and did not understand how he did it. Zhang replied with his nose in the air that it was nonsense, because she said that he worked miracles. If she wore them tomorrow, she would definitely catch them off guard. She bowed to him and said that she appreciated it very much. She didn't even know how to thank him. The protagonist asked her if she could do him a favor and she was surprised. He handed her the clothes and asked if she could wear this outfit. Ikai took it and pointed with her finger, saying that it was a very strange style, and asked why she had to wear it. The protagonist came up with the idea that he bought it for his girlfriend and does not know if it will fit her, so he wants to see how it sits on her. They just have the same size. The girl smiled and replied that he should wait a minute. She would change into a suit right now. Some time later, the protagonist sat and thought that now with his eyesight restored, Ikai is a rare weapon. In tomorrow's final, she should be able to destroy the lineup of the opponents. He will spend a few points on some things, which should be enough until his body recovers. Immediately, Ikai said that she was done and the protagonist turned around in anticipation. Ikai appears in front of us in an office suit. She asked if Zhang is sure that they have the same size, because this outfit is too small. The protagonist replied that the costume is not small and looks cute. The system immediately informed him that the body was still in a cooling state. Energy could not be stored. And in order to ensure Zhang's safety, he was being removed and his nose was bleeding. The girl ran to him and asked what was wrong with him. He panicked a lot when she was running towards him and her balls were jumping. Then the girl stepped on an uneven board. She immediately fell right on top of the protagonist and he asked her not to approach. After that, the protagonist sat down on a chair and looked at the girl strangely. The girl really apologizes to him. She tripped and fell. She didn't want to hurt him. She bent down and asked me to ask her. The protagonist replied that everything was fine and the apology was accepted, and also suggested that she discuss tactics for tomorrow. He understood that for some reason his cultivation base had been lost, and he would not be able to recover until tomorrow. So it depends on her and Tichui. The girl bent down and apologized. She did not expect that the fall would lead to such consequences. Her shirt tore and the protagonist got very excited and asked her to stop bowing. He decided to put a blindfold over his eyes so as not to see her and said that the final would be between the 3 teams that won today. They will definitely put them first. She and Tichui can try to delay time as much as possible. And if they can hold out until he recovers his cultivation base, they will definitely win. She said she would come back and discuss it with Tichui. She would do her best and added that this dress was torn. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter. He had a couple more sets. She should just go and find Tichui and discuss tactics with her. Ikai agreed and decided to leave. And the protagonist said that they would see each other tomorrow. As she left, she wondered if all men looked like that and noted that he was quite handsome. Immediately, she corrected herself, because she is the one who devoted herself to cultivation, but she had such obscene thoughts. The protagonist was glad that it was finally over. If she hadn't left, he would have bled to death and asked the system to exit. The system congratulated Zhang on completing the 7th task and he will receive a reward for it. The protagonist asked her to wait a minute. Zhang asked if he could exchange this reward for points. The system asked if he was sure, because all the rewards are rare equipment, and points can only be exchanged for common items. The exchange for points is impractical from the point of view of benefits. The protagonist smiled and said that then she could give him more points. Next time he would try to create more advantages and asked what she thought. The girl began to get a little angry and replied that she was not interested in benefits. Rewards could be exchanged for 39.99 points, and if there was no objection, she would transfer them to his account. He had 360 points and also transferred 39.99. The protagonist replied that there were no problems and she could continue. In total, he got 4,359 points. The protagonist said that he was going to trade them for something for tomorrow's competition, and asked if she had any useful weapons. For example, 98 Kelvin, M416, Italian pistols or something like that. The system agreed. It also has sniper rifles, exoskeleton armor and new generation individual nuclear weapons. She asked him if he needed them. The protagonist replied that if she had said earlier, he would have ruled the world with these things a long time ago. The system shouted at him not to even think about it. This is not the era of firearms. She asked if he was crazy or drunk. The protagonist asked if she didn't have it, so why was she shouting so loudly, and what could he trade for? The girl decided to show him and started creating everything. A moment later, a bunch of different weapons from the goddess appeared. Looking at this, Zhang said it wasn't a bad thing. After that, the next day came and the judge said that the finals of the martial arts improvement of the 6 sects were about to begin. The participating disciples of Lingyun sect, Xuanjian sect and Jade Goddess sect are invited to the stage. The participating Lingyun sect disciples will be led by Qin, a talent that has never been encountered in thousands of years, known as the Gentleman Lingyuan Sword. He is the favorite to win this year's championship. Xuanjian also sent the strongest members of his clan. The Night Owl claims to be able to chop off the head of an enemy general among thousands of soldiers. He can be described as a bloodthirsty beast. The judge also invited everyone to take a look at the participating disciples of the Jade Goddess sect. But everyone was surprised, because the protagonist was eating at that time and offered the others a snack, which made the girls a little embarrassed. The judge thought they were still having breakfast. Sect Master Xuazjian started laughing loudly and thought that Zhang Lan was completely stupid. She was still eating pancakes at this time. Another head asked Linson not to forget how 3 of her students were defeated by her punch yesterday. You should never underestimate an opponent. Another head said that the Jade Goddess sect should never be allowed to show off again. If this gets out, none of their 5 clans will be able to show up publicly. The third one asked him not to worry, because this is the end of their luck. The Empress understood that the Linyuan and Xuanjian clans would definitely join forces to attack Zhang Lan and the others. But she did not understand why Zhang Lan was so calm and whether he had any plan. A judge appeared above the ring and said that this final was a 3-way melee involving 9 people. And there are no other restrictions except that no one's life could be harmed. Those who surrender or lose consciousness are considered eliminated, and the last clan left on the field is the final winner. He asked, they figured it out, and everyone unanimously agreed with the judge. He added that there are 90 minutes until the end and the final begins. The Xuanjian clan ran forward and Kaizai told his brothers to go ahead. The protagonist began to shout that the girls had already turned around. Kai realized that something was wrong again. Tekui asked what was the matter. The protagonist explained that he can only strike 3 times a day, but today they have 6 enemies. He didn't know which of them would get in their way first. The Xuanjian clan realized that such a terrifying strike could only be used 3 times a day. Although they had discussed victory tactics with the Lingyun clan last night, but since he could only strike 3 times, Kai wondered why they should attack first and smiled maliciously. Qin was angry, and Hu Wang shouted that Kaizai was a bastard and chickened out. Ken asked if he wanted to force them to make the first move. If the enemy didn't move, they would too. It had already been 30 minutes, but no one moved and everyone did not understand why everyone was standing and thought that they might be looking for the enemy's weaknesses. Linson got very angry and asked what they were doing. They should go ahead and fight. Wudong noted that the clan master was angry and asked what to do. Kaizai replied that so that he wouldn't worry about him, they needed to see what the Lingyun clan would do. Wait a bit, if they go first, they'll end up badly. The protagonist was lying on the floor and thinking that there was still an hour left until 12 o'clock. If he could be pulled, then they would definitely be the winners. Immediately, Ikai shouted for them to be careful and the protagonist got up. Ikai dodged, and Tekui began to maneuver the daggers with her hammer. Well, Zhang was shocked. The audience was glad that they had finally started moving. Qin said that he suddenly felt that it would be too boring if everything went on like this and they could warm up. The judge said that it was Qin who finally made his move. Tekui assumed that he was provoking them, and the protagonist realized that he had seen through his bluff. If only he could really use the punch 3 more times. He had to stand in front and prepare to meet the enemy. He realized that the battle was finally about to begin. Kaizai asked Qin if he had really taken the first step. Wudong asked if they should make a move too. Kai told him to take his time and let them fight. They would wait for an opportunity before making a move. He has never served anyone. Qin, Hu Wang and Zhao Liang ran forward. Qin said not to wait for them, they're on their own. The 2 ran forward, and Hu Wang jumped and was right above them, and Ikai immediately thought that this was not good. Qin noted that he thought it was a bluff and ordered Hu Wang to kill her. He grabbed 2 axes and swung them and said to leave it to him. The protagonist looked at me with serious eyes. The Empress also tensed up and said the protagonist's name in her head. Hu Wang stepped on a trap. The protagonist only managed to say goodbye to him, and he was surprised. Immediately, he flew back and started screaming. people realized that Hu Wang had been thrown out, and the guy was surprised by how the traps ended up in the arena. The other clan heads were angry and asked if there was some kind of agreement this year and why he didn't tell them. The blonde panicked and replied that he had just found out too, and assured that they had not set any traps. Otherwise, how could the disciples of their sect step on them first? The clan masters think that all this is for a reason. They thought Zhang Lan did it, but he thought it cost him 30 points. Zhao Liang shouted that the protagonist was shameless and set traps. Tekui slapped him on the back and said that with his virtue, he still has the courage to judge others. Ichai used her techniques on Qin and he had to ask Kaizai if he was still busy. Immediately, Ikai's ears started to hurt. The night owl began to emit sound waves, and Kaizai and Wudong ran forward saying that this Zhang Lan was very evil. First you need to kill the blind woman, and then deal with the short-legged girl. From his words, the flow began to get angry. Kai and Wu ran to Ikai and he said that she was as resilient as he was. Immediately, she let her strength into them and they flew back. Ikai put on her glasses and became sighted. The protagonist said that she beat them up. The hour of victory weighed directly on their side. Kai's eye was injured and didn't know if she was really seeing. Immediately, Ikai began to beat Kai and Wu quickly with her feet. Qin shouted at him to beware of her traps and Zhao Yang understood him. He took off his clothes. His muscles increased in size and he began to laugh. He was running very fast forward. Immediately traps appeared out of the ground and he was surprised. The bamboo sticks hit his body and broke. He started laughing and said that these bamboo poles could only tickle him and asked what else he had. Immediately, another iron stick appeared, which hit him right in the face. Qin was surprised with this sound. Zhao was in a lot of pain and he thought it was an iron bamboo. It hit him in the face and knocked out all his teeth. The protagonist noted that there were 2 more left. Qin started to get angry and shouted whether he would finish at all or not and threw the daggers. The protagonist immediately took out a shield and defended himself from the daggers. Qin was surprised that the shield was so big and did not understand where he got it from. The protagonist pulled his arm out of the shield and threw something. It was a callista with bolts. The protagonist noted that he himself wanted to fight with a hidden weapon and smiled maliciously. Qin started running away and shouted that it wasn't a concealed weapon at all. Night Owl struck with his spear and smashed the protagonist's weapon. Tekui noted that this guy had made his move. Owl said Zhang used so many tricks, but why would he slow down? After all, he doesn't have the opportunity to use yesterday's 3-punch technique. He asked if he was right. The protagonist realized that he was not so stupid. He secretly observed his shortcomings. The Empress understood that Zhang Lan could no longer attack, but she did not know why. Night Owl noted that it was not difficult to dodge Qin Yun's knives, but he decided to hide behind a shield. It can be seen that not only can he not use his technique, he cannot use even the simplest movements. He added that it was time to put an end to this farce. The system reported that the cooling has been completed and the divine body can be charged and used. The protagonist was happy with this information because his fists are already itching. Black Owl wanted to attack the protagonist, but he had already prepared and was waiting for the attack. Immediately, Tekui's hammer flew in and beat off the owl's whip tail, which even surprised Zhang Lan. Tekui was injured and asked why he was frozen because he had to dodge. The protagonist, looking back, asked her not to worry because all the most dangerous things are behind her and that she fasten her seatbelts. Qin was surprised, and Owl thought again that it was a bluff. Zhang strained his arm and, preparing to use his strength, shouted that they were going to kindergarten. Owl and Qin were at a loss. He wanted to hit, but nothing happened and Zhang himself was surprised. The system reported that the current energy reserve is 0% and it should be charged on time. The protagonist asked why she was only talking about it now. Owl noted that he had had enough fun. Now Qin can relax. Qin himself exhaled, because he had scared and almost fooled him again. Immediately, he remembered about the improved stockings of the current. If she takes a hot pose and he touches her, his energy will recharge. But she has a leg injury. But he immediately said that she could handle it. He ran to the girls and shouted the name Tekui. And you were surprised. He said it might hurt a little, but she had to do it, and the girl was surprised and embarrassed. Immediately there was a strong explosion and the protagonist flew away. Qin smiled maliciously and said that no matter what he wanted to do, he would not succeed. The protagonist was lying on the floor and was angry. He saw that the girls were unconscious and he did not know how to charge the divine body now. He can't ask the Empress to put on a uniform to seduce him in front of everyone. If he reads adult magazines now, the charging will be too slow and they won't give him a chance. He panicked and asked God to send him a girl. At the same moment, Qin hit the night owl and broke the illusion seal, causing it to spit blood. A moment later, the owl flew forward and fell. Zhang Lan was surprised that they started fighting each other. Qin thanked fellow Taoist for helping him solve the problem with the Jade Goddess clan. Now it's time to solve the problem with him. The head was angry that Qin had really attacked his warrior in the back. And the head of the Qin clan replied that this was a competition, and it was not worth showing kindness here. The owl mask began to break and fall to the ground. It turns out that the night owl is a beautiful girl, and she turned around and said that Kin is a traitor. Kin started laughing at her and told her to blame herself for being too stupid. The protagonist was surprised that the night owl was actually a girl. He was very glad that this was a god's offering because a girl appeared. The owl was angry and threw knives at Kin. He just jumped up and said it didn't pose any threat. He rushed straight at her and shouted that this was the end for her. He hit the ground with all his might, but the protagonist managed to save the girl. Immediately, they both fell down and started screaming. The judge noted that Zhang Lan had saved the night owl, and he assumed that they had decided to join forces at the last minute, but it's unlikely to help them. Kin was angry and said that he wanted to play with Zhang more, but apparently he was begging him to die. The owl slightly damaged his pants and asked the protagonist what he was doing, because she didn't need help. Zhang asked if she was willing to let that bastard win. If she was willing to help, he could beat him. The owl thought about it and asked how she could help. Kin rushed forward and shouted that the time for requests was over. Immediately, a large cloud of smoke appeared and Kin was surprised. The judge suggested that Zhao Lan had used a smoke bomb and that he wanted to stall for time. The judge shouted that Qin Yun did not dare to act rashly, which meant that Zhang's tactics had worked. Qin was angry and thought that he had just taken a break and he wanted to beat the judge after the competition. The owl turned to the protagonist and asked what he was doing. Zhang took out her clothes and told her that her clothes were torn and she had to put them on. The girl got angry and thought that he just wanted to humiliate her. The protagonist replied in denial and said that it was difficult to explain, but as long as she wore it, he could defeat Qin Yun. The owl grabbed the clothes and said that it was nonsense, because she had long heard that the disciples of the Jade Goddess clan showed attraction to their gender. Today she has proof of this. She would just drop it so that everyone could understand clearly, and the protagonist shouted at her not to do it. The girl touched the suit and was surprised. She began to examine it and said that she had never seen such a smooth texture. She wondered if she would wear it, how silky it would be. The protagonist agreed with her and said that she should try on a costume. The girl began to undress. She agreed to try on a costume, and the protagonist saw all the charms of the girl. He is very excited and the divine body begins to charge. Qin started laughing and shouted that he saw them and rushed forward. He put the force forward and added that he had won. Immediately, the protagonist simply destroyed his ability with his fist. He asked not to worry, because the competition has just begun. And the owl was embarrassed, because the skirt is too short. His divine body charge, 120%. She did not understand why she was ashamed and happy to wear such revealing clothes. The judge did not understand what was going on here, because the night owl suddenly changed into an unprecedented outfit. The audience noted that she was too far away, and they couldn't see clearly. Another guy asked what she was wearing, and the third one got excited. The Empress was angry because she did not understand what they were both doing in the smoke. Qin was surprised that Zhang deflected his roaring tiger fist with just one hand. He didn't understand how he did it. The girl was very ashamed, and the protagonist replied that he looked cute. Zhang was surprised by his words and replied that such a soft blow. He thinks it should be called the fist of a domestic kitty, and the owl began to laugh. The protagonist noted that this girl looks fierce, but she has a pleasant laugh and pretty big balls. Immediately, the system reported that the divine body was charged at 150% and he should immediately release energy. The protagonist quickly turned away and the girl was surprised. Zhang knew that if he looked at it again, it would be fatal. Qin was very angry and shouted how dare he slander his unique skills. He'll tear his mouth apart. Immediately, the protagonist rushed straight to him and was already near him. He hit him very hard and said that Qin was a chatterbox. He asked if he wanted to fight. Why is he talking so much nonsense? The judge shouted that Qin Yun had been knocked down. Zhang Lan suddenly became powerful, and he showed tremendous strength again. Qin stood up and noted that he obviously had power, and asked why he hadn't shown it before. The protagonist replied that he just wanted to tease him and asked if she couldn't. Qin rushed forward and shouted at him not to think that he would be afraid of him just because his strength had recovered. He decided to use Genuine Dan to its full potential. He quickly started throwing quick punches and screamed. The protagonist easily beat off all the punches with one hand and noted that he was too weak and asked if Qin could do it only after taking doping and if he had kidney failure. Qin was very angry that his eyes were crazy. He took out his sword and shouted that it was his own fault, and the protagonist was surprised. The Empress noted that it was a Demon Slayer sword and asked if the head had really given his disciple a Demon Slayer sword that contained enough power to destroy the world. The head replied that it was an ordinary weapon and she should not make a fuss. Qin tried to hit Zhang and shouted. A huge beam flew towards the protagonist. The clan heads started discussing it. The first one laughed that Zhang did not shy away, so this time he will definitely win. The second one said that although it took too much effort, at least the Jade Goddess clan would not be able to attract everyone's attention. The third one said that unless he had an ancient divine weapon, the Gyuan sword, but that was impossible. The protagonist took out that most ancient divine weapon and repelled Kin's attack and noted that they were so pompous. Kin was very surprised and did not understand where she got it from and considered it a scam. And all the chapters were just in shock. Everyone was surprised when they saw the Gyuan sword, because the ancient magic weapon was here and it was in the hands of the Jade Goddess clan. Someone did not know if there were still powerful treasures in the Jade Goddess's clan. The Empress got angry and asked why they were looking at her, because they should be looking at the competition. The heads were surprised and did not know. She is so rich that she keeps such a fortune a secret. Qin shouted that he would not let Zhang win and put his blood on the sword. The judge realized that he was summoning the sword demon with essence and blood. Qin Yun is going to perform his final trick. As soon as this move is made, someone will definitely die. Qin has shown what it means to never give up. Then the whole audience started rooting for Qin Yun and added that down with Zhang Lan. They were all for Qin Yun. The owl realized that tens of thousands of people were screaming at the same time. Anyone would be offended by this. Even if Zhang Lan has a magic weapon to protect herself, she is afraid that the hostility of the crowd will embarrass him. Immediately, the protagonist struck with his sword at the place where the audience was sitting, which shocked everyone. The protagonist was angry and told them not to force him to cut them all. The owl thought she was thinking too much. The judge shouted that he had attacked the audience and threatened it. As a judge, he wanted to do something. But he looked at the very evil protagonist and was confused. He changed his face and said that Zhang should win the game. The Jade Goddess clan would win. Attacking the weak and fearing the strong, the judge has the true character of a pet dog. Qin was shocked, because this arena was built of black reinforced concrete. Even if he attacked with all his strength, it would be difficult to create even a gap, but he cut the arena with a random blow. Even if he donates his blood, he won't be able to win. He understood that to take a step was to die, and he did not understand what to do. The protagonist viciously said that he had only two options left, to die or to surrender. Qin smiled and said he was giving up and laughed. There is no shame in giving up or losing one day. The judge shouted that Qin Yun had surrendered, and the head of his clan got angry and called him a cowardly bastard. The referee said that in other words, the final winner of this game becomes. But before he could finish, he asked what was going on between Zhang Lan and the Night Owl. The girl thought that he was mocking her, because she did not have such abilities and she also gave up. The judge shouted that the Night Owl had also surrendered, which means that Zhang Lan is the ultimate winner. He announces that the Jade Goddess clan is the final winner of this year's 6 Clans Martial Arts Improvement Conference. Immediately, Qin started spitting blood and covered himself with his hand. He fell to the floor and spat even more, and these two were embarrassed. The protagonist approached him and said that this was a negative reaction due to the power he had not released after the blood sacrifice. Immediately, the Night Owl shouted to Zhao Lan to be careful. The head of the clan rushed at him saying that his disciple had already surrendered, but she killed him anyway. The head hit the protagonist right on the chest, and the system reported that he had 20% energy protection left. Immediately, the protagonist jumped back and turned over. The head said that as the master, he must administer justice today. The protagonist was in great pain, and immediately everyone saw that the protagonist was not a girl, but a guy. The Empress realized that they had been discovered and became angry. Immediately, everyone was surprised and did not understand why Zhang Lan's clothes were stuffed with buns. The protagonist quickly turned away and said that his clothes were torn. The head noted that this is a man disguised as a woman. He thought it was a joke. He began to laugh, because he remembered that the Jade Goddess clan, which claimed that it never allowed men to enter the mountain gate, allowed a man to fight for the clan. Owl was confused when she realized that Zhang was a man, because Owen had just changed clothes in front of him. Another head noted that, alas, it turns out that they did not invite help from their clan and this is really upsetting. A third added that they weren't so virtuous after all. What a reputation the Jade Goddess clan has left among the 6 sects. Their words made Empress Xuaniao angry. The head of the Qin clan turned to Zheng Xuaniao and said that she should give an explanation to the whole world in front of the 5 clans. The Empress assumed that the Jade Goddess clan would be eliminated from the 6 clans. She stood up and said that now that it was revealed, the protagonist was eating a bun and was surprised by the words of the head and called him a pompous asshole. He asked if the Lingyuan clan chooses the clan master based on who is the most shameless among them. The head asked him who he was to speak here. He would deal with him later. The protagonist shouted that he just likes to interrupt. He tore off his clothes and said he was a dumbass. When the Jade Goddess clan explicitly said that men could not join it, the judge said that he only knew that there were no men in the Jade Goddess clan. But the rules of their clan don't seem to specifically say that men can't join it. The bald man added that after so many years, everyone was used to it. The head got angry and asked why he had disguised himself as a woman, because it was obvious to him that they wanted to deceive everyone. Zhang said it was his little hobby and asked if it wasn't abnormal. When he said that he was a female student, the protagonist decided to sacrifice his reputation for the sake of the clan. Jun Chuaniao, I owe him. The head was very angry and asked if he thought he was an idiot. Still wants to deny such an obvious thing. The protagonist asked her to stop talking nonsense. If he says they broke the rules, then show proof. Did the Jade Goddess clan promise not to send male disciples to participate in the competition? Or they forbid people like him to feel? If they don't have proof, then they should shut up. The fat man noted that Zhang's tongue was hanging. Another thought it sounded like complete nonsense. But the third added that you couldn't argue with him, and also asked if his chest wasn't bulging too much. The head of the clan was angry and asked how dare he deny everything, because he was not born yesterday. And the 6 clans should not tolerate someone like him. The protagonist realized that this chapter did not understand the slightest hint. Zheng Chuaniao's internal injury has not healed yet, and Tekui and Yichai are still out. He understood that he would have to retreat. Immediately, someone appeared from above and said that the master of the Changrong clan said he wanted to see who is the real villain in this arena. This was the great disciple of the Jade Goddess clan, Long Wuxuang. The Empress stood up and realized that Wuxuang had ended her seclusion a month earlier, and did not understand how she managed it. The fat man got angry and asked where this student came from. It's impolite to speak in such an arrogant manner. She's not coming down yet. The protagonist was delighted and noted that this angle was good, but a little dark, and his body began to charge. Long Wuxuang said that 5 trash clans conspired to cause trouble for her Jade Goddess clan. She asked if he really thought that there was no one capable in the Jade Goddess clan. The head got angry and shouted that it was nonsense and he should let her down. 3 guys immediately jumped out and agreed to do it, because they were already angry. The guy said they were law enforcement officers at a martial arts improvement conference. They advised them not to resist, otherwise she would put herself at risk. Long Wuxuang was surprised and asked again. She rushed at them and asked, and that's what they tell her. The 3 of them immediately used the Golden Dragon Array, but she broke through her shield with her power and took them down. A moment later, the 3 of them flew down, and the protagonist wondered what kind of shit the Golden Dragon was, such a fancy name, but couldn't stop a single blow. The protagonist realized that he didn't know anything about Long Wuxuang. Zhang asked if she was so amazing. Al said that she is the strongest fighting force of the Jade Goddess clan. Once she stopped 30,000 aliens with her own strength. It is said that she is also the only one who has received the true legacy of the Jade Goddess clan's power. Her master said that her current cultivation base was probably comparable to the Empress base that was 10 years ago. The protagonist was surprised and said that he had a feeling that the Empress had always been ill, and asked if she had ever been so strong. The system said that the mysterious power of the Jade Goddess is the first miracle in the world. There are 9 stages in total. They get stronger and stronger as he moves up, but when he reaches the 8th stage, and breaking through it, he will gain the power to defy the heavens. Long Wuxuang was able to break through the 5th stage. The Empress has already reached the late stage of the 8th stage, and she has only a little bit left. The protagonist noted that she talks about it so excitedly. The head shouted and said that she was doing well. She dared to kill his people. Today he would teach her the rules himself. Immediately, the deputy master of the Lingyun sect appeared, who asked the master to calm his anger. He asked if he didn't know that this Long Wuxuang was the only daughter of the Long family. He was afraid that angering the Long family would not be good for them. The head was angry because he had completely forgotten about it. The head turned away and said that the competition was over. The deputy congratulated the Jade Goddess clan on winning this competition. The protagonist was surprised and asked if they weren't going to fight. The protagonist said that he needed to hurry up, and he started running to the girls, and the owl said goodbye to him. She blushed a little and thought that next time she would have to find out what was so special about him that allowed him to settle in the Jade Goddess clan. After winning the 6 clans competition, he suddenly turned into the hero of the Jade Goddess clan. Now, he can walk around the sect at will. It's just better to avoid these girls. They all looked at him and noted that he had a beautiful posture and a very cool gait. The 3rd girl noted that he had amazing buns and she wanted to touch them. However, it is very strange that the system did not give him a new task for 3 days. He thought it was strange because the Jade Goddess clan, although it looked more like Yin Kai, he stood in front of a large building from which an unknown aura emanated and noted that it was not so demonic. The protagonist came to the door and the demon laughed. She was surprised that a man appeared in the Jade Goddess clan, although the clan always claimed that they did not have men. Zhang said that he would go about his business and said goodbye to her. The demon asked him to wait, and asked if he didn't want to come in and take a look. He asked her what it was about the sealed demon. She laughed and said that if he came in, she could tell him something about one big thing. The Empress. The protagonist also thought about her big balls. He immediately looked behind the door and said that her breasts were already majestic, but he did not know if there was another size. She was a beautiful, restrained blonde. She laughed and called him a bad brother, asked what he was thinking. She's talking about the Empress' big secret. She asked who he was, why he was in the Jade Goddess clan. The protagonist, closing the door, said that he most likely misheard. He is a kind of gatekeeper. The girl let her power into him and asked him to come closer, or else he was still afraid that she would eat him. The protagonist came in again and said that seduction did not work on him, and she could not waste her energy. She was surprised. The demon noted that Chang was a very interesting man. Even without temptation, he can see what she looks like now. She asked if he didn't just want to pounce on her. The protagonist replied that a month ago he would definitely have wanted it, but now he doesn't. He asked her to just be a good girl and that's it. She got angry and called him a smelly man who is only interested in the breasts of the Empress. She asked. He wasn't even going to look at her. Chang asked her not to worry. He wouldn't be able to do it for another 2 days anyway, because he had had enough. He said he would come back to her in a few days when he was ready. Purple chains immediately appeared and wrapped around his neck. They squeezed his throat and the protagonist asked what was going on. She stood up and asked if he was surprised. The protagonist was surprised when he realized that the chains did not bind her. Chang realized that she had lured him inside because she wanted him to open the door of the tower and immediately closed the door with his hand. The demon pulled him towards her and asked him not to rush to close the door. She did not plan to leave at all. The protagonist tried to pull out the chains and asked what she wanted to do then. The demon sat down next to him and said that she had said this from the very beginning. She just wants to do something bad to him. She began to cut his clothes and asked him not to worry, because she would not harm him in any way. He should lie down and enjoy it in peace. The protagonist was very confused when she began to undress and he asked for help and did not understand what kind of world this was. He did not understand if it was really so dangerous for the boy to go out alone. The girl said that no one would stop her. The protagonist did not understand what she meant and what she was up to. He was very scared and made a funny face. Immediately, he came to his senses and closed his eyes thinking that he couldn't let her do this. He decided to free himself completely. The girl tore his underpants and laughed angrily. Immediately, a yellow flash appeared, which blinded her. A huge yellow ray appeared from the temple, eclipsing the demonic aura at the same time. The girl wiped her eyes and noted that she did not expect him to be able to attack. Looking ahead, she thought he was gone. The protagonist appeared behind her and said that it was a rescue trick that he had practiced during his 18 years of solitude. Zhang immediately shackled her and the girl asked him to let her go. Zhang Lan only told her to put up with it. No matter how she moved, she would not be able to free herself. The demon asked if these 2 iron chains would be able to hold her. She advised him to kill her while he had the chance, otherwise she would be able to break free in half a day. The protagonist took another chain and asked her not to worry, because that's not all. The girl was confused and asked what he was up to. Immediately, the protagonist began throwing chains at her. He shackled her even more and the demon called him a pervert and hung him up. Then he decided to leave, said goodbye and thanked her for the compliment. And the girl screamed at him to let her go. The protagonist came out thinking, since this is a demon, why bind her with only 2 iron chains, and is the Jade Goddess clan so negligent in their actions? He said it didn't matter, it had nothing to do with him anyway. The goddess, watching the protagonist, laughed and noted that he was not only exceptionally talented, but also mastered the binding technique. It turns out that he is very experienced. But he was still careful during previous assignments. She decided to double the difficulty of all the tasks. After that, I show us the protagonist's room and he slept there. Immediately, someone called Zhang and he woke up. He went to the door and opened it to see Shawnee, who said that he was still asleep, so it was not surprising that something had happened. The protagonist was surprised and asked what happened. The evil girl told a little that a thief had entered the clan. Even the Empress's students were offended. She asked how he guarded the mountain gate, and the protagonist was even more surprised. The protagonist got dressed and following Shawnee. She added that in broad daylight the thief was able to enter the clan, and then disappear without a trace. It's just terrible. The protagonist asked how many people there were. The girl replied that there were at least 10 people. The protagonist was surprised that 10 people entered the Jade Goddess clan in broad daylight. She said that now he knows why the Empress is angry. Zhang thought he was finished. He shouldn't have left here yesterday. From behind the doors, someone said that it was at least 10. Maybe there were even more of them outside. Otherwise, how could she not defeat them? Shawnee asked him not to talk nonsense when he came in. Zhang was confused when he heard a familiar voice. When he opened the door, he saw a statue and a demon. The blonde shouted that protecting the clan was useless and it was her own fault. She was confused and asked if she had seen what they looked like or what methods they used. She will immediately send someone to investigate. Shouting told the Empress that she had brought Zhang Lan, and the girls turned around. Tekui noted that Zhang was guarding the mountain gate yesterday, and asked if he noticed any movement, and the demon was confused. The protagonist embarrassingly replied in denial. The demon was just in shock and didn't understand how he got here. The protagonist recognized this girl with the big balls. He didn't understand how this little demon could be the Empress' sixth disciple. Taekui asked Xiaohu what was wrong with her. The girl replied that she was a little dizzy. The Empress said that Zhang Lan is the mountain guardian of her clan, and he is extremely strong. She had to tell him what had happened. He may have seen these thieves. The protagonist thought about it and realized that he had done all this alone, and did not know why she lied to everyone that there were 10 people. The strangest thing is why the Empress's sixth disciple is locked in a demon tower. Immediately, the system informed him that it would now give him the 8th task, and the protagonist was surprised, because he had not been given a new task for a long time. He must teach Xiaohu to be a masochist within 10 days. The reward for completion is unknown, and the punishment is death by anal explosion. The protagonist was embarrassed by the demand and felt that this task was clearly beyond the scope. The blonde turned around and said as she left that she was tired and would talk about it later, but Taekui was surprised. Zhang asked, shouting why he had never seen this student. She told me that she was the last demon fox. The entire demon fox clan was attacked by mysterious forces. Fortunately, the Empress was passing by and saved her. She always wanted to leave the clan and go for revenge, but as the last demon fox, she was stopped by countless people. Only in the clan can they ensure her safety. Later, when the Empress created a tower to contain demons, she was completely locked up in the clan. She was unhappy about this and often sabotaged the sect. The Empress often locked her in the tower so that she could reflect on her behavior. The protagonist was surprised and understood everything. He felt that it was no wonder that her seal in the demon tower was so weak. She turned out to be one of them. Immediately, Xiaoning stood in front of the protagonist and said that he should remember to stay away from Xiaohu. The protagonist was surprised and asked why. She said that over the years, Xiaohu had been doing her best to leave the Jade Goddess clan. Whatever she does, the Empress will tolerate it. But there is a ban. If one day she breaks it, she will be expelled from the clan. In the ancestral training place, the disciples of the Jade Goddess clan master are strictly forbidden to engage in adult business with men. For violation, they will be excluded from the clan. And the protagonist was embarrassed. After that, the blonde stood on the roof and thought that this time she would definitely be able to successfully escape. She was licking her lips and wanted to get Zhang Lan. After that, the protagonist carefully looked around and looked over the wall. The protagonist remembered that Xiaoning had told him that he had to control himself and not mess around. If Xiaohu is expelled from the sect, she will have a sad end. He didn't know why the pressure was on him. Immediately, the protagonist noticed Xiaohu's hand and was surprised. The girl tried to grab him and shouted that she had caught him, but he dodged. He quickly got up and ran forward. He didn't understand how she had managed to appear so quietly behind his back. Immediately, the girl grabbed his leg with a ribbon and asked where he was running to. The protagonist tried to break free and said that if it wasn't for the Empress, who would let her do such nonsense? The girl jumped up and shouted Nirvana. The protagonist quickly moved his legs away, and the girl fell straight to the floor and it hurt her. The blonde leaned against him and said that it hurt and invited him to come to her. The protagonist said that she should stop. She grabbed him by the lower part of his body and said that it was there and asked the monkey to let her touch his peaches. The protagonist replied that they were not peaches. She shouted that she had caught him and hugged him. He tried to push her away from him and Xiaohu said that now she would see how he could escape now. Immediately, someone grabbed the girl and lifted him up. It was Long and she asked her if it would be enough. The blonde started screaming and asked to let her go because she hates her. Long said that the deputy clan master should have already told him about Xiaohu. The protagonist replied, that's why he would rather die than obey. Long praised him and told him to keep it up, while Xiaohu shouted at her to let her go. After that, the Empress took a bath and Xiaoning and Long came there. Xiaoning said Xiaohu would not give up. They have to come up with the perfect solution. Long said that she was offering to castrate Zhang Lang to avoid trouble in the future, and Zhang Lang was thinking. The Empress laughed and said that it didn't matter. It was also a test for Zhang Lan and they would wait and see. Xiaoning was surprised and asked why test Zhang Lan. She thought it was a test of his loyalty to the Empress. At this time, the protagonist was hammering boards into the door of his room. He figured that now it was as hard as gold and no one would be able to enter. He wanted to see how she could come and molest him now. Immediately, a purple aura appeared through the cracks. The protagonist was surprised and did not understand what it was and thought it was a poisonous fog. The protagonist decided to meditate to distract himself. The demon was laughing and wanted him to have fun. The protagonist understood that he needed to stabilize his mind. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. The girl literally enveloped him in her illusions and asked him to open his eyes and look at her. She asked him what he was afraid of. Immediately, the protagonist turned out to be with the goddess and noted that he did not summon her and asked how he got here. The goddess replied that this system does not obey him. She said that if she wanted to appear, she would appear. She asked why he would call her. The goddess approached him and noted that this girl had taken the initiative. She had come to him herself. She did not understand why he was so cowardly. The protagonist noted that she even has popcorn ready. She just wants to watch the show. The protagonist knew that Ziohu didn't really like him. He doesn't want to sacrifice his body to do things like that. The goddess smiled, because she did not expect that he had a pure mind. It's kind of interesting. She added that she was looking forward to it even more then. The protagonist saw the Empress and Xiaoning lying on the bed together. His nose bled from excitement, because these were the most beautiful girls of his clan. He covered his nose and noted that he couldn't take it anymore. Immediately, the door from the protagonist's house just flew out. The protagonist could no longer stand it and left the house. Ziohu stood in front of him. She laughed and noted that in the end her fox scent came in handy and it came out on its own. The protagonist looked at her with crazy eyes and excitement. He jumped right at her and she was a little surprised. She thought it had awakened the beast in him. Ziohu thought it was great. She smiled and said she was ready and they could start. Immediately, the protagonist released a huge beam from his hand. The girl turned around and asked what he had done. Zhang exhaled. The protagonist explained that he used his inner energy to force out this state. Now she won't be able to get him. The blonde noted that he really punched a hole in the defense holding back the demons, and he was surprised and began to panic. She thanked him and jumped over the barrier, and the protagonist asked her to wait. Zhang fell down and realized that he had just used too much force and his body had not recovered yet. He started to lose consciousness and thought it was over. After that, the protagonist was tied up and brought to the palace to the Empress. Xiaoning said that as the guardian of the courtyard, he not only allowed thieves to enter, but now also destroyed the protective barrier, causing her sixth sister to escape. According to the rules, he should have been executed, but he won the honor of the clan at the Martial Arts Improvement Conference, so she can make an exception. The protagonist exhaled and considered that she had a conscience. Xiaoning said that she was being replaced by the imperial punishment, immediate execution. The protagonist shouted that they still wanted to kill him and he couldn't stand it. The Empress said in denial, because he did not intentionally destroy the barrier. Xiaoning replied that this was already the minimum punishment that could be applied in accordance with the rules of the clan. The Empress replied for nothing. She asked if the Jade Goddess clan had ever had a male disciple before. How can they use such a thing as imperial punishment? She was embarrassed by it. Xiaoning noted that she was hesitating. She's really hesitating. Xiaoning realized that she was really not indifferent to Zhang Lang. Wang immediately appeared, who said that the most important task was to get her younger sister back first. She went to the Haiming Mountains, where demonic energy is most abundant, and cultivating the ghost fox demon technique would be more effective. Once she succeeds, her mind will be enchanted, and it won't be easy to save her again. The Empress agreed with her and added that this was the most important thing right now. She turned to him and said that he had let her go, and therefore had to return her. This is the only way for him to correct his mistake. She asked what the deputy thought. Xiaoning replied that if the master thinks it will fix him, then she has no opinion. The protagonist agreed and said he would do everything in his power to get her back. Long added that both of them are enough to get her back. They don't need a lot of people. The girl grabbed him by the collar. Both flew out of the palace and flew towards the mountain. After that, they flew over the forest and Long continued to hold it. Zhang asked if she was sure that the two of them were enough. Long replied that cultivating Ziohu requires a lot of demonic energy. They can split up and find a place with the most demonic energy. The protagonist agreed with her and asked her to let him go, and she did it. Immediately, the protagonist flew down and he started screaming. He started hitting different trees and finally hit his face on a rock. The protagonist was in great pain and he noted that he should learn to fly. After that, he got up and noted that it seemed to him that no matter what world he was in, it was always possible to escape from home. Then he saw a big purple ray and understood everything. The protagonist saw Ziohu, who was in the form of a fox demon and was cultivating. Zhang crept up to her and stood behind a tree. He understood that while she was concentrating on her cultivation, he should knock her out with a stick. Immediately, she opened her eyes and they lit up with a purple flash. She used her power and hit the protagonist, and his stick broke. He crashed into a tree and was surprised, because it had only been 2 hours since she had escaped, and she could already send him flying with one glance. Then the demon stood up and walked forward. The protagonist realized that it was no wonder they wanted her back. She was just a monster destroying the world. Her current strength should still be at the third heaven stage. If he gave it his all, he would still be able to control her. He quickly scanned the erotic magazines and was 100% charged. He agreed to fight her. The girl released purple energy into him and the protagonist himself began to glow yellow. Zhang repelled her attack with his shield and his charge decreased by 10%. He ran around her from behind and grabbed her with his feet and said she was caught. Immediately, the protagonist began to feel her balls, and she was surprised. The girl was embarrassed and blushed, and the protagonist thought that they were so soft. It takes energy to control her, and this pose recharges him. He thought it was great. He would call it perpetual motion mode. Its charge has reached up to 110%. Immediately, he saw the girl's tail in front of him and was surprised. The tails grabbed him and pulled him away from her, and Zhang thought it was bad. The girl got very angry and turned around. He felt that this blow would definitely pierce through him. He decided to invest 50% in energy protection. Zhang created a shield, and the demon wanted to hit him. She struck, but her attack seemed to fly back and she took damage herself and was struck by lightning. The girl jumped away from him and started running away, and the protagonist asked her to wait. Finally, she shot fox poison at him, and the protagonist's eyes began to get angry. He closed his eyes and said that even without seeing, he would still be able to catch her and shouted for her to come here. Immediately, he grabbed her by her buns and was surprised. He didn't understand what his finger was hooked on. When he opened his eyes, he was very excited and confused. He felt that the indescribable horizons had expanded. Xiaohu hit him and jumped in embarrassment, and he apologized. After that, we are shown an ominous cave. Someone from it felt the aura of a fox. After so many years of waiting, it finally happened. The last fox demon in the world. She will finally fall into the hands of the king. It was the Tiger King. The protagonist got up and ran forward. He understood that it was too difficult to find a fox demon in this forest. Immediately he stopped because he felt a sharp bloody smell and was surprised. He thought he had found her and ran towards the smell while jumping through the trees. Zhang came to the smell and saw the torn animals and was surprised. He did not understand why there were corpses of animals and where Xiaohu was. Immediately, he heard a splash and looked right there. The protagonist came out from behind the bushes and told Soyaka to stop causing problems. It was the beautiful Long Wushwang who was naked. The protagonist immediately covered his face, but not completely, and said that he had not seen anything. He felt that she deserved to be an older sister. The girl covered herself up and said that hadn't she told him that they would split up, and asked why he had come running here again. The protagonist replied that she went to the west, and he went to the east, and this is the east. Then they silently looked at each other and were confused. She immediately turned around and began to leave, and Zhang realized that it turned out that she was poorly oriented in the area. After the girl got dressed, the protagonist followed her and asked if she had killed all these animals. Wushwang Long replied that when she was tracking Xiaohu, she noticed that she was passing through here, but they suddenly attacked her and she had to sort it out. Xiaohu must have wanted to slow her down. The protagonist didn't even know that Xiaohu had the ability to control beasts. Immediately, Long realized that this was not the case. Xiaohu grew up in a sect, so she couldn't control the beasts. The protagonist asked, then who did it? The girl jumped and flew forward, saying that whatever it was, their goal was to prevent her from finding Xiaohu. The protagonist asked if she wanted to take him with her. Zhang realized that he had better rely on himself. He would have to run as hard as he could. After a moment, the protagonist stopped and was surprised. He told Long that he had found something here, and the girl was surprised because she realized that the explosive power of this guy was so monstrous he was able to outrun her on just his 2 legs. The protagonist saw pieces of Xiaohu's clothes on a branch and said that a battle had just taken place here, and there might still be traces left. He took this piece and realized that someone had found Xiaohu faster than them. Long clearly said that she knows who did it. The protagonist was surprised and asked who it was. Looking at the claw marks on the ground, she replied that it was the scum of all beasts, the king of tigers. After that, they show us inside the cave and there were dog guards who guarded the entrance. Immediately, this dog noticed something and was surprised. In an instant, the girl cut off their heads in one motion. The protagonist was surprised and, passing by, noted that the older sister had good skills. Long said that the Tiger King was cruel by nature, and if he failed to achieve something, he killed the culprits. When he goes there, he must not act rashly. When he finds Xiaohu, he must return. He will need to meet before making a plan. The protagonist agreed with her. After that, we are shown how 4 guards sat by the fire and discussed something and laughed carelessly. Long was watching them from behind the wall. After that, we are shown the rabbit girls, who carried underwear and towels on a tray. Immediately, the girl flashed after him. Xiaohu was tied to a pole, and they were preparing to do something bad to her. Long was very angry and felt that the tiger deserved to be the scum of all animals. She hit the rock and called Xiaohu shameless, because it was all because of her. Immediately, the Tiger King ran up to her and she turned around. He asked her if the Jade Goddess sect master had sent her here. The girl began to create weapons and, catching fire, replied that she was here to pick up someone. If he wants to live, he has to give it to Xiaohu. The tiger said that he would have to refuse. This Xiaohu is the last demon fox. Many people around the world were waiting for her. He has already agreed with the buyer. He will arrive soon. If he returns it to them, will it be beneficial for him? From his words, Long got angry and rushed into battle, saying that then she would have to deal with him. Immediately, she stopped, and her body ached violently. The tiger asked what was wrong with her and if she was ill, and Long clutched her head. He took her by the shoulders and the girl asked what he had done to her. The tiger said that in order to catch Xiaohu, he waited for more than 10 years in this dark cave. He knew that their Jade Goddess clan would definitely not give up, so he did not sit idly by, waiting for an opportunity. After countless experiments, he finally perfected the bone-destroying incense to resist the Jade Goddess clan. She has inhaled a lot of incense. It will hit her heart and lungs, and she will not have the slightest strength left. The girl blushed deeply and told the monster to stay away from her. The monster grabbed her hand and asked if she thought this room was meant for Xiaohu. He added that this was not the case. He sees which of the Jade Goddess clan's disciples can be seduced. It turns out that Wushwang was the most cold-blooded and laughed. He thought that today was really his lucky day. And Long realized that she did not need to split up with him. Immediately, the protagonist broke through the wall and kicked him in the face. It was the vivid appearance of a handsome man. Long was surprised when she saw Zhang Lan. The Tiger King flew off and fell to the floor. He looked at Xiaohu and asked what the bastard was going to pack Xiaohu as a commodity. Long Wushing said that he poisoned her and she can't use her powers. Now everything depends on him. The tiger got angry and stood up and asked where the bastard who dared to touch the king was. The protagonist laughed and replied that today he would not only touch him, but also roll around with him. The tiger got angry and rushed at him, telling him to die. Immediately, Zhang kicked him right on the chin with his foot. Long was surprised by the protagonist's speed. The tiger was in pain and he grabbed his muzzle. He felt that this kid was not simple, and do not underestimate the enemy. He and Long Wushwang are in the same group, which means that he is from the Jade Goddess clan. He didn't understand why he had to fight Zhang so hard. He was thinking of just waiting for Zhang to get poisoned. The tiger wanted to say something, but couldn't and his teeth fell out. The protagonist was surprised and asked what he had said. A little embarrassed, Long replied that his teeth had fallen out and he said something unintelligible. Immediately, the tiger began to write diligently on paper, and the protagonist was surprised that the king of tigers could write. The tiger wrote that Zhang was an idiot and should just wait, because he would soon die of poison, and the tiger smiled maliciously. The protagonist was delighted and started clapping. Because he thought it was so touching, the tiger wrote about him, and the king himself was also delighted. Zhang immediately added that before he sent it, he would beat him to death and hit him right in the face. He began to inflict a series of attacks on him all over his body. The tiger understood that the harder he hit, the faster the poison spread through his body. Zhang will die soon, and if he survives, victory will be his. The protagonist took a swing and decided to tell him that he forgot to tell him that he only lives in the Jade Goddess clan and does not learn their skills. He immediately slapped him in the face again, and Tiger wondered why he hadn't said that before. A moment later, the king fell to his knees and raised a white flag, and Zhang was surprised that he was giving up. The protagonist asked what he should do with this guy. Long was angry and replied that it was an unforgivable crime and he should kill him. Zhang Lan smiled maliciously and laughed and replied that the exquisite tiger bones, tiger claws, and tiger skin would be an excellent reward. Tiger wrote that he had useful information and asked them to let him live. The protagonist was surprised and asked what information he had, and the tiger began to write diligently. He looked at them sweetly and wrote that it was true about the extermination of the demon fox clan. Long understood everything and folded her hands and told Zhang to let him live a little longer and tell him everything. After that, the girl sat down next to the protagonist and told the tiger to say it, and Zhang was embarrassed when she crossed her legs. Tiger wrote that speaking about the shortness of the year, the words he had said before, the long year is cut short and the wind wants it to suddenly cause rain, the 8th of the 10 meanings and the 9 words of the long night. From all this information, the protagonist and Long drooped. The protagonist exchanged 5 points for Lao Meiyan's decoction and inserted special dentures for the elderly so that he could tell it all, and the tiger was surprised. The king was delighted and thought it was amazing. He really grew teeth again, and Long asked him to get down to business. Tiger agreed and said that the demon pill of the fox demon clan is a rare thing. It brings great benefits to farmers, so it has been hunted for about 1,000 years. 30 years ago, the only remaining tribe of fox demons hid in the mountains, and no one could find them. It was completely by chance that he found out about their whereabouts, so he passed this information to Xuan Jianzong. Xuan Jianzong could not bear the shame of destroying the fox demon clan. 6 meetings were convened for discussion. All the other 5 sects wanted to attack the demon fox clan and take away the demonic pill so that their disciples could practice. But the Jade Goddess sect opposed it, so this meeting was considered a foregone conclusion. Long intervened and asked that Xuan Jianzong and the others secretly attacked the fox demon clan anyway, and only Hu Xiaohu was saved by the hurried empress. The tiger replied that it was so. The other 5 sects declared that they were the same as the 6 sects. The empress couldn't expose them either, so she brought Hu Xiaohu back to the sect to raise her and tried her best to protect her. The protagonist thought about it and felt that it was no wonder that Hu Zio, who always wanted to escape to get revenge. It turned out that she had always considered the Jade Goddess sect to be an enemy of genocide. Tiger agreed with him and added that he didn't quite know. The protagonist got angry and hitting the tiger with his foot added that with such an expression on his face he should tell others, and he flew away from the protagonist. Long said the Empress never explained anything to Zio because she knew Zio wouldn't believe it. As a witness, they may be innocent. She told him to put them back together and wait for Zio to wake up before clarifying it in person. The protagonist approached her and agreed. The tiger began to panic and asked them not to touch them, because he had already sent information to Hu Zio to the buyer and he was on his way. Not to mention the Jade Goddess sect. This buyer can afford all 6 sects. The Jade Goddess sect will be destroyed. The protagonist broke the box and said that even if Heavenly King Laozi was here, he would not be able to take it away. The protagonist saw the bound demon fox in the system and informed him that his charge had risen to 115% and it was dangerous. Immediately, she fell on top of him and he began to panic violently and asked Long to come and help him. The protagonist walked forward in embarrassment, and Long thought about it. She thought that Chang was a disciple, but she did not expect that he would turn out to be a gentleman who would not dare to take advantage of the misfortune of others. The protagonist got angry and called him a bastard, noting that he dared to do such a mean thing to Zio. The tiger replied that he would not dare. The maids were preparing all this. He assured her that he had not touched her with a finger. The protagonist hit him hard and shouted that he did not dare to object, because in any case, he had to hit him to extinguish the fire. The tiger broke through the ceiling and flew out of the cave, losing its teeth again. Immediately, he noticed 2 flashes in the sky and realized something. Wang Bai is the buyer here, and now Zhang is definitely going to die. The protagonist told Long that he needed to get out of here faster, and it was not worth wandering around the mountains, and the girl, in turn, tensed up. She said that it really made her angry, and the protagonist was surprised by her words. The tiger began to quickly run away from the big flashes and thought that these gentlemen had come quite quickly. He should be safe with them. Immediately, the protagonist landed on him and asked where he was going. He must dutifully return with him and wait for the fox to wake up. Zhang took him by the mane and pulled him up, adding that later he would tell her everything in order, and King Tiger asked Zhang not to pull him like that. Long also appeared immediately, holding Zio in her arms and saying that they needed to hurry up. At the same moment, unknown people appeared behind them and told them not to stay long, and the protagonist looked back in surprise. It was an old man with a girl. The old man apologized and explained that this demonic fox had already been bought by the young master to their family and asked them to give it to them. The protagonist got angry and grabbed the tiger by the collar and asked if he had already taken the money from them. The tiger began to quickly turn his head and deny everything. They agreed that payment would be made immediately after the transfer of the goods. The protagonist apologized in response and added that they were a little late. The seller has not received the money yet, so the transaction is invalid. They're taking this vixen. The old man laughed and noted that this boy was funny, and if he doesn't want to be nice, it's going to be bad, and in an instant it changed to evil, and the girl behind him disappeared. Immediately, she appeared on the side near Long, and she only managed to turn around and was surprised. She understood that her cultivation hadn't recovered yet and she was going to be in a lot of pain right now. Immediately, the protagonist grabbed the girl by the dress and asked where she was soaping up, because he was her opponent, not her. Zhang, holding her, added that they were completely unreasonable. They were all told in understandable language, but they still do whatever comes into their heads. The girl got angry and in embarrassment shouted at him to stop looking and tried to kick him. But the protagonist dodged and noted that she had beautiful long legs. Long understood that it was not worth getting involved in the battle and it was better to leave. The old man looked at Long and recognized her and could not believe that this was her. At this time, the girl continued to try to beat the protagonist, but he easily dodged and told her to better stop trying to take the fox away from them. He doesn't want to hit the woman, and she was angry. She got angry and told him not to look down on her and hit him between the legs. Even the old man realized that it was very painful and was embarrassed. The protagonist folded his hands and exhaled, because he thought it was some kind of trivial trick, and she was surprised. The protagonist said that he is now a hexagonal warrior with no weak points. In fact, Zhang spent 20% of his energy on strengthening in a part of the lower place. The girl blushed and did not understand why it was so firm there. The girl thought that he probably had an iron plate there and wanted to see, but the protagonist was surprised and asked what she was doing, and Long was also surprised and did not understand what he was doing there. At this time, the tiger crept up to Zio and smiled maliciously. After that, the girl squeezed him with her legs and the embarrassed protagonist said that he was not even allowed to breathe. She grabbed him and called him a scoundrel and wanted to see what he really had there. Immediately, Long grabbed her clothes, which surprised her. Long threw her on the floor and said that since he couldn't get his hand on her, then she would deal with her. The protagonist was confused by Long's rear view and his nose started bleeding. A bump on her head appeared from hitting the ground and she lost consciousness. The protagonist was surprised and asked if her cultivation had recovered, and she showed him to keep quiet. The old man behind laughed and said that he thought that this girl seemed familiar to him. It turns out that this is the one who left her family to escape from the engagement with their young master. He thought that she had really tried, hiding in this wild mountain region. The protagonist was surprised by his words. He asked her that there was only a jade sect here, which meant that she had hidden there. The girl did not know what to answer. She tried to say something, but could not find the right words. The protagonist, looking at her, did not understand why she was so scared. The old man glared at her and noted that unexpectedly he was doubly lucky today. He ordered her to obediently return with them. Otherwise, if the young master himself sent someone after her, it would not end well. The girl was very scared, and he added that he did not want the jade sexta to drown in a river of blood. He approached her and said that she should return and make amends to the young master, and perhaps he would spare her. Immediately, the protagonist grabbed the old man's hand. Zhang said that the evil old man decided to take Long's hand at that age. The old man advised him to be reasonable. He got angry and added that Zhang should stop going against him over and over again, and asked if he even knew who was behind him. The protagonist asked and decided to listen to who. The old man agreed and asked him not to pee himself out of fear. He is from one of the 4 main Huazhu families. Immediately, the protagonist slapped him in the face and said that it was nonsense. He didn't want to listen to it anymore. The old man grabbed his girl and ran away, shouting that he had dared to insult the Wang family and should prepare for a storm of revenge. He will wait, the old man assured. The protagonist saw the old man running away and said that he was annoying and should just be silenced forever. They were in the wilderness anyway, and then they would just find a place where no one would stick around and bury him. Long asked him not to do this, because it would kill all life within 100 miles. The protagonist turned around and asked what kind of engagement he was talking about. The girl lowered her head and said that she would tell you when they returned. Immediately, Xiaohu woke up and was furious, and the Tiger King laughed loudly. Long was surprised and asked why she suddenly started running amok. The protagonist replied that King Tiger took advantage of the fact that they were distracted and poured demonic Kai into Xiaohu. King Tiger told Xiaohu that they were the ones who exterminated her people and she should kill them. The girl growled very much and was just furious. Even the protagonist covered himself with his hand from her. The girl was angry and told them to return the lives of her people. The protagonist did not understand why it seemed to him that Xiaohu had become stronger again. Long explained that she had already uncovered 5 tails. Now her powers are equivalent to the 6th level of cultivation, much higher than the 2 of them. The protagonist realized that the bigger the tail, the stronger it was, and noted that he had seen a similar situation in some manga. Xiaohu created a huge paw of purple aura and shouted that she would take their lives. Long pushed off the protagonist and shouted at him not to be distracted. The protagonist landed and asked if there was any way to bring her to her senses. The tiger started laughing in response. He said that in truth, the scariest thing about the technique of the demonic tribe of underground foxes is that it is able to release all the hatred inside. All Xiaohu can think about right now is revenge. It is impossible to restore her sobriety of mind, unless she is forced to experience stronger emotions than hatred, which, unfortunately, they simply cannot, and then continue to repeat it insanely. The protagonist noted that if he had enough strength, he would have been able to defeat her in battle, but after several skirmishes in a row, there is no longer enough energy. His current energy charge was 55%. He knew there was only one chance. The protagonist smiled and asked if he could ask her for a favor, and she was surprised. The tiger asked what they were up to and ordered Xiaohu to kill them. She immediately shot beams at them, and the protagonist jumped forward and asked her to be careful. Long fell to the ground and started calling for the protagonist. It turned out that she had fallen right on top of him and was therefore very embarrassed. And the protagonist bled from excitement, and her charge was charged to 100%. The girl quickly got up and asked if he was okay. Xiaohu was very angry and shouted at them to go to hell. Immediately, a large aura hand appeared behind Long. The protagonist appeared next to her and repelled the attack. Zhang said he would let her feel what fear was. The tiger was shocked that the protagonist tore the ghostly claws of the fox with his bare hands and thought that he was mocking, and the girl rushed forward. The protagonist also ran at her. He hit her in the face with his palm and told her to wake up. The girl thought about it and did not understand where she was. It seems that she heard Zhang Lan's voice. She didn't understand why her face hurt so much, and besides, why it made her feel good. The protagonist hit her again, told her to wake up. He called her a fool. She realized that it was indeed Zhang Lan's voice. She didn't understand how he dared to hit her. She was in pain and it itched all over her, but it was also nice. She began to feel good when he beat her and she literally melted in front of her eyes. After that, the protagonist and his company saw how a couple of squirrels were engaged in adult business. The protagonist thought about it and thought that was enough. Long said she seemed to be back to normal, but didn't understand why her expression was so slutty. Xiaohu came to her senses, but blushed deeply. She turned to Zhang Lang and told him that his palms were so generous, so warm and strong. The protagonist was confused and hoped that she was not stupefied after the blows to the head. Immediately, she jumped right at the protagonist and told him not to stop, to continue to admire her, not to desire her just because she was a girl. Long immediately stood in front of the protagonist and called her the sixth sister. The protagonist was embarrassed and asked the girl not to approach him. The system congratulated him on completing the 8th task. Reward: a partial enlargement technique that can be used to increase the size of certain body parts. She also asked to continue teaching Xiaohu, and he would be rewarded with more points. The protagonist drew an analogy that, in between, he stuck a willow branch into the ground, and it grew into a shady tree. Long held Xiaohu and she asked Zhang to beat her with all his might. Wang understood that Xiaohu was behaving abnormally and needed to be taken to the head as soon as possible. The protagonist agreed with this. While they were discussing everything there, the Tiger King wanted to quietly escape. Immediately, a sword appeared in front of him and the tiger stopped in fear. The protagonist appeared behind him and said that if he dared to resort to such tricks again, he would dry his lower organ and make a tincture out of it. The tiger was scared and replied that he wouldn't dare. After that, they were in the main hall of the Jade Sect. Tiger said that the destruction of the Demon Fox clan has nothing to do with the Jade Sect. The other 5 sects are to blame for everything. The Empress and Xiaoning were confused, because Xiaohu hugged the protagonist and he shouted at her to let him go and listen carefully, because the tiger tells the truth about the death of her people. The girl replied that she was listening, but asked him not to be so cruel to her. If he hit her, she would get up. The protagonist asked her to stand up, because the head of the sect is watching. Xiaohu stood up and asked him to hit her as soon as possible and substituted a 5th point. Shauna closed her eyes and noted that another one had fallen into a trap. The Empress was also already embarrassed and asked Xiaohu to stop being naughty. She then turned to Zhang and said that he had found Xiaohu and helped her find out the truth about the Demon Fox tribe. He has corrected his mistake and will be forgiven. The protagonist thanked the head of the sect. He also thought that she was a miser because she could have given something. The demon hugged the protagonist and asked if she could now call him master. Immediately, Shouting asked how Wang was and why she wasn't with him. The protagonist replied that she had just left, and the Empress was surprised. The system gave him the 9th task. He needed to complete it in 10 days. The essence of the task was to return Wang to the Jade Sect. The reward for completing it was unknown, and the punishment for failure was complete baldness. The protagonist was surprised that Wang had left the Jade Sect. Tekui immediately appeared and told the head of the sect that trouble had happened. Eldest sister has just escaped from the sect with her luggage despite the obstacles, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Shouting asked Zhang when he was with Wang if he noticed anything unusual. The Empress did not believe that she could leave without saying goodbye, and assumed that something had happened. The protagonist said that they met 2 people. They wanted to take Xiaohu away. The older sister's expression was strange when she saw them. He asked the tiger monster what the origins of these 2 people were. The king replied that Zhang was too fierce and he shouldn't have insulted them. The Wang family from Lanai is behind these 2. The Empress recognized the Wang family from Lanai and realized that they had discovered her. After that, the Empress was in her room and Shouting brought the protagonist to her, and he was a little surprised. The Empress was lying in her chambers and asked if he knew anything about the Wang family from Lanai. Zhang blushed at the sight of the girl and noted that the Empress looked so lovely today. The protagonist replied that he had heard about them for the first time today and asked if they were very strong. The Empress's view changed and she said that there are 4 main families on the Huizhou continent that it is better not to quarrel with. These are the Yi family from Longling, the Lu family from Qingyun, the Qin family from Xiajun, and the Wang family from Lanai. The 4 main families are so influential and have so many masters that they can match the whole country. The protagonist asked if they were exaggerating too much, and then they were so strong compared to the 6 sects. Shouting answered for her and said that many of the disciples of the 6 sects are, after all, from the 4 main families. In addition, they are the main ones of their sects. Zhang smiled and asked what turns out that the 6 sects are still stronger. Yet the 4 main families are forced to send people there for training. Shouting replied that he was wrong. These people are only representatives of the side branches or children of concubines of the main families. They join the 6 sects because of their impurity of blood, because they are not direct descendants. Although Qingyun, who participated in the 6 sect martial arts conference, was a member of the Qin family from Xiajun. The protagonist grimaced and asked if he was so well born. The Empress replied that because he had no talent for cultivation, he had to join the 6 sects as the mentor's last disciple. Wang is the only daughter of the Long family from Shaanxing. They wanted to get closer to the Wang family. Therefore, she was betrothed to Wang Fugui, the heir of this family. But Washwang did not want to put up with this. She ran away from the family and became her disciple. The protagonist added that on that day at the martial arts conference, it seemed to him that the heads of the six sects had learned the identity of Sister Washwang, and asked why after that the Long family or the Wang family did not visit the Jade sect in search of her. The Empress replied that the identity of Washwang was known only to some heads, and they did not want to interfere in this matter. After all, the Long family or the Wang family, none of the six sects wants to make enemies. The protagonist understood her. If after the disclosure of this news, Sister Washwang would return to the Wang family and become a young mistress there, she would certainly want to settle accounts with them. And if she pretended not to know, neither side would be able to blame her. The Empress replied that she thought she could hide her in the Jade sect, but they coincidentally ran into members of the Wang family and were recognized. This time, Washwang left without saying goodbye, probably because of fears that the Wang family would take out their anger on the Jade sect. Tekui immediately appeared and told the head that she had led people after her sister, but she refused to return. She said she was going to come back and get married. They couldn't stop her. The protagonist understood that the task required him to return her. Of course, they would not succeed and said that he himself would like to. The Empress stood up and said that Long was determined to leave, so he would have to go there himself. Xiaoning will remain in charge and should not cause trouble, and Zhang Lan will go with her. Everyone was surprised, including the protagonist. Xiaoning asked why not ask Tekui to send some female students with her. The Empress, stepping forward, said that it would take time to collect people and things, which they did not have. They would immediately set off light. Xiaoning took Zhang's hand and said that she understood it. Then she decided to explain something to Zhang Lei. The protagonist asked, "What is there to explain?" Xiaoning made a very cruel face and said that if he tried to do anything inappropriate towards the Empress, she would cut his thing and she would make a tincture of it, and Zhang was embarrassed. After that, they show us Lanai County, where there were few people. The Empress changed her clothes and said, as expected from one of the most famous cities of Huizhou, it is really thriving. The protagonist was a little angry, because that's what she calls going light. Zhang was carrying a lot of her bags. She told him that they should go and find a hotel. The protagonist was glad that he could finally rest. After that, they show us a large building where the doors were open. The man apologized to them. Because the Wang family recently held a big party, the inns throughout the city are now crowded. There is only one room left in their hotel. The protagonist blushed, as did the Empress, and Zhang was shocked that he would have to rest with her. The man asked if they could stay there together. As a result, they settled down together. The Empress said that according to the information, the Wang family will hold a wedding ceremony for Wang Fugui in 3 days. The protagonist added that therefore they should pick up the Washwang before the wedding. Zhang was reading a certain book and blushed, agreeing with the girl. The girl was taking a bath and asked him if he had any ideas. Zhang thought about how he couldn't think with so much blood in his brain. The girl washed and asked in surprise, "The quality of the tables in this hotel is so bad that even the height of the legs is different." The system was informed that the current charge of the protagonist is 130% and is already quite dangerous. The protagonist stood up and his stick hit the table and said he thought the table would balance after a while. The Empress walked forward and apologized to him, but said that he would have to sleep on the floor. The protagonist replied that it didn't matter. The floor and the bed he slept on in the sect's security room were almost identical. The protagonist blushed and thought that form is non-existence, and non-existence is form. Amitabha, it seemed to him that it was beautiful. The girl sat down in a pose and said that she was going to practice, so he should keep quiet and think about how to return the Washwang to them. Zhang, looking at her, was confused and agreed with her. The protagonist began to think that everything in this world is illusory. Emptiness is a form, 3 virtues, 9 shallow, 1 deep. The system said that his current charge is 190% and he must release energy immediately. Otherwise he will explode and die. The protagonist grabbed his stick and ran away, saying that he would go look around. After that, I show us a girl I already know. She said that the young master's momentous event was about to come, and everyone needed to be on the lookout. Also report on every minor movement within the city. The guards agreed with her. She walked past the other guards and they greeted her. She quickly hopped around the house and went downstairs, and the 2 guards were left alone. The system informed Zhang to release the energy immediately, otherwise he would die. The protagonist also asked the goddess to stop putting pressure on him, because he should not attract attention. Immediately, that girl appeared behind the protagonist and told this intruder to die, but he managed to evade. The girl swung and said she knew the weak spot. The protagonist, expecting a blow, realized that this was his chance. He put 90% of his energy into defense. Immediately she hit him and the guards heard the bell ringing, and another asked if there was a monastery nearby. The protagonist said that he liked it. The system notified him that he now had 100% energy, and the girl was surprised. She said that there was only one person in the world who could achieve such firmness in this place. They recognized each other and were very surprised. And the girl was confused. The protagonist pressed his hand to her mouth and told her not to make a sound. Otherwise, he will make sure that she... But before he could finish, she interrupted him and said that she could help him, whatever he was going to do here. Only he has to fulfill her only condition. And the protagonist was surprised. The protagonist was confused and asked if it was about seeing his third leg. Her name is Wang Guanju. She is quite experienced, has seen and learned a lot, and knows that there can be nothing so solid in the world. That's why she wants to expose his little combat secret. The protagonist was embarrassed and told her not to touch him because he would call someone. Wang told him to call if he dared. Then they would see what the Wang family guards would do to him. He had come here to see Long Wuxuang. The protagonist realized that she could lead him to her. The protagonist agreed and said he would let her watch, but she would have to take him to Wuxuang and asked if they had agreed. The girl agreed, but added that if she found out that he had a steel plate there or something like that, she would make him bleed in this place. The protagonist got a little angry and replied that it was nonsense and asked why he needed steel plates. And he thought to himself that he would do it for the glory of men. She didn't believe him, otherwise she would have been able to punch him and pulled off her pants. The protagonist applied partial magnification at the last moment and increased his stick, which made the girl blush. His stick is incredibly large, with the size of Wang's head, which surprised her. Wanju immediately screamed violently, which scared even the guards. One asked what the noise was, the other replied that it was a girl's scream, and the latter ran with the words that he needed to go and check. After that, they ran away from the palace and one guard told the others to check there. Zhang hid behind the roof and said that she almost killed him. Turning around, he asked if she could escort him to her right now. The girl seemed to lose herself and repeated that they were all liars. The protagonist was a little surprised and asked why she looked like a ghost. He began to rub her and told her not to dare to deceive him. He fulfilled his part of the bargain. The girl started crying and said that these bookstore owners had lied to him. They insisted that the illustrations in the books were realistic. The difference is too big. She was almost scared to death. The protagonist realized that this pervert had looked at everything in the books, but he thought she was experienced. She wished she had seen something so great before. After that, they flew past the guards. Then she showed him the house and told him that Long Wuxuang was in that house. He had time until one stick of incense burned. She'll stay outside and let you know if anything happens. Zhang understood her and thanked her. He approached the house and noted that there was only one person in the room, and judging by the aura, it was Sister Wuxuang. Immediately, he opened the door and called her name. The girl was changing clothes and turned around and was surprised. The girl was shocked when she saw him and called his name. The protagonist allegedly closed his eyes and noticed that he had not seen anything. The girl grabbed his hand and told him not to talk nonsense, because it wasn't the first time he had done this, and he was surprised. She dragged him into the room and told him to come in soon, because it would be bad if someone noticed him. Zhang asked her if she really planned to marry Wang Fugui. The girl replied that she had already brought trouble to her family, and did not want to involve the Jade sect in this as well. Only if she married him would she be able to keep them all safe. The protagonist approached her and said that they did not need her protection. Besides, the Empress personally came for her, right here in the city. He invited her to come with him to her. Wang Guanju, looking at the house, did not understand why this guy had not come out yet. After that, we are shown an old man who scolded the girls' wards for the fact that Long Wuxuang did not want them to be in her room and they left. He asked them what if she ran away. Immediately, the protagonist and Long heard the old man's voice and were confused. Wanju intervened and greeted her uncle. The old man asked why she was here. The girl replied that she was afraid that the bride would run away, so she came to guard her. The old man walked forward and replied that it was no longer necessary. She has to keep going around the city so that there won't be any trouble. The girl replied that she had already finished patrolling. The old man asked why she was talking so loudly. Wanju was surprised and replied that she did not think so. Long Wuxuang noted that there is no way to pass through here because they will be noticed. The protagonist began to panic because he thought he was finished. He knew that he needed to exchange his glasses for an invisibility amulet before coming here. The girl decided to hide him and told him not to make a sound. Immediately, the old man opened the door and Wanju began to panic. Long immediately asked manager Wang if it was not customary in their family to knock before entering. The old man replied that this old servant was negligent and asked him to forgive him, but Wanju did not understand where he was and where he had gone. The protagonist hid under the skirt and was glad that it was long enough. Zhang grabbed the girl's leg to hold on and not fall. Long Wuxuang was a little embarrassed by this and blushed. The old man asked her what had happened and if she was ill. The girl blushed even more and replied that it was nothing, just a small insect stung. The protagonist began to apologize to her and assured her that it would not happen again. Immediately, he looked up and saw something he shouldn't have seen. The old man turned around and said he was glad everything was okay. He asked her to put on her jewelry because the young master would come to see her soon. The girl was surprised and asked if Wang Fugui would come. The old man took the jewelry and agreed, so she should not forget to dress appropriately. He also noted that these decorations do not go well with this outfit. However, they were chosen by the young master himself, so they have to change the young lady into a wedding dress. Let it be the dress of Tianzi number 3. The girl agreed with him. Long Wushwang said that she could change her clothes by herself and did not need the help of outsiders. The old man said when he left that time was short, so there was no need to be modest. She knows what the consequences will be if she angers the young master. And she asked, she doesn't want the Long family and the Jade sect to drown in a river of blood. The girl was immediately confused and scared. The old man left the house and told Wanju to come out too, and she hid behind the door and agreed with her uncle. After that, the servants asked Moons to undress. Wanju noticed the protagonist's leg under her skirt and, confused, realized where he was hiding, and now he's definitely a mess. The protagonist began to panic and realized that if he was discovered, then he was finished. The system asked Zhang if he wanted to purchase a transformation item. He can spend 10 points to randomly obtain a directed transformation talisman that can change its appearance to a random object within 30 minutes. The protagonist started crying and replied that he wanted to, and she should give it to him soon. The system created a wheel and told him to press stop to stop the wheel scrolling on the desired item. The protagonist noted that it seemed like now was the right time for this wheel. Immediately, he pressed stop and decided that everything should be reasonable. There can't be a table or a chair under the dress. After a moment, he was surprised. The girls asked Long to cooperate with them because the young master will be here soon. Moon didn't know what to do. She thought that the only way was to kill all these maids. Immediately, she felt something and did not understand what Zhang Lan was doing there. The girls tore off her dress and apologized, and the girl was embarrassed and covered herself up. The maid told her to change her clothes and wondered why her underwear was so unique, especially the carved patterns on the edges. She'd like that for herself, too. Lung thought it was strange, because she did not remember wearing anything like that. Besides, she did not understand when Zhang Lan managed to escape. The protagonist turned into underwear and thought it was reasonable, but a little embarrassing. The system informed him that he had a very high energy charge and he had to release it immediately. The old man had already started to get angry and told Wanju if she could stop wandering around. He was already dizzy, but the girl thought that this was the end. Wang Fugui immediately appeared and the old man was surprised. And Wanju saw her cousin. He is the young master of the Wang family from Lanai. He told them to go and see his bride together and they agreed. Fugui thought it was strange and did not understand why an unfamiliar man was here. They entered the room and the old man said that the young master had arrived. The maids greeted Wang Fugui together. The old man told them to get out. Fugui took her hand and noted that he did not expect anything less from Long Wushwang, who was able to shock the whole world with her beauty. They are much better off than all those flirtatious girls. Wang noted that Wang Zher has a wealth of experience with women. Fugui laughed and said that he didn't have many of them. He stood behind her and confessed that he had only had 341 girls. Fugui sniffed her and did not understand why she smelled like a man and thought that before she was here, she had an affair with a man. He told his uncle He to come out, and he was surprised. The old man noted that they were getting married in a few days, and the gentleman told him not to do anything before the wedding. Wanju supported him and asked her brother why he was in such a hurry. Fugui got a little angry and ordered them to get out of here. The old man understood him and wished him a good evening. And Lung was a little surprised and asked what he was up to. Fugui said that it was nothing. He just wanted to inspect the goods in advance. She was surprised by his words. The system told the protagonist to release energy as soon as possible, because his current charge was already 160%. The protagonist was very angry and did not understand what it was. This pervert was going to get on the train without buying a ticket. He rushed at her and invited her to have fun, and she even screamed. Fugui was angry and thought that if he found out that she was no longer innocent, he would deprive her of her position and good name right at the wedding. The girl asked him to let her go. Immediately, he was very surprised and changed his gaze. Under her skirt, something rose up and a frightened Fugui asked what else it was. The girl was surprised and turned to Fugui and replied that she did not know herself. She thought it was Zhang Lan. He started hitting her and didn't understand where she could get such a thing. He realized that he had smelled it. Immediately, the protagonist himself jumped out from under the skirt, which made Fugui just shocked, and he screamed very loudly. And the old man noted that the young people really do not know how to restrain themselves. Lung was surprised and Zhang asked if he was going to spend the night with her before the wedding, and that he was completely arrogant, and Fugui's eyes hurt. Then he asked if he was the guardian of the Jade sect. It was he who stole the demonic fox from him. The protagonist agreed and said that he was going to steal his new bride today. Wang, he's from a famous family. It's not good to force others to do something against their will. He'd better let her go. Fugui was angry and said that he was going to go to the Jade sect to settle accounts with him. He didn't expect Zhang to show up here on his own. He asked who Zhang thought he was. The protagonist hit him right in the eye and left a bruise, and he shouted how dare he tell him what to do. He rushed at him and shouted that he would destroy him, and Zhang suggested that he try to do it. The old man heard the sound and did not understand what was going on there. The fugue flew off and hit the wall. The protagonist was surprised, because he used 70% of the energy and still couldn't defeat him. Louis asked how he was and if he was hurt. Zhang's current charge is 90%. Fugui noted that his wave palm is usually enough to turn a cultivator at the level of the Great Emperor of the first layer into mush, and he only backed up 2 steps. He didn't know if Zhang's cultivation level was higher than his or not. Both realized that they were difficult to deal with and got ready. Fugui asked who he was and what technique he practiced. The Jade sect is just one of the 6 sects. It is impossible for them to raise a person of his level. The protagonist replied that what he was cultivating was nothing more than a non-standard method. It was not worth mentioning. He understood that it was obvious from his behavior that he was afraid of him, and it would be necessary to trick him. Zhang added that he had to pick up Wushwang today. If he wants to stop him, he has to try. Fugui was angry and lost in thought, as if in his position he could allow someone to be taken away. But he understood that he was not Zhang's equal. It's not worth risking your life for this girl. Immediately, the old man opened the door and ordered the guards to protect the heir and capture the intruder. They stood in front of Zhang and he said that it was great because they were just in time. Starting today, the Wang family will cease to exist. Old Man He recognized Zhang and noted that it was him again. Not only did he dare to break into their territory alone, but he also uttered such crazy words about the destruction of their family. Fugui asked the old man to wait and offered Zhang to serve everything. The whole world knows that he will marry Wushwang in 3 days, and he is trying to steal her because then he will lose face. The old man was surprised that the heir was really willing to discuss terms with him. The protagonist understood that if he endured the battle, he would find a way to raise his cultivation level and return to save Wushwang. Zhang suggested that he postpone the wedding, and that it take place in 10 days and no one should touch Wushwang during this period. Fugui was surprised and said that he did not expect that he was also obsessed with love. He was determined to steal a woman from him. However, they had just fought in a draw. If he wanted him to agree to this condition, he would have to fight again. The protagonist was surprised by his words and realized that he had 90% of the charge. It should be enough for another fight. But if he starts denying it again later, he will lose. Fugui said that since this is a competition between 2 men, they will arrange a duel not in strength, but in size. The protagonist was confused and asked again. Zhang thought that this special Wang family was completely abnormal. At first, Wang Wanju wanted to see, and now the heir wants to compare it with his own. Fugui laughed and said that he is known as the 10,000-mile whip and the pillar to heaven. If he doesn't want to embarrass himself, it's not too late to apologize. The protagonist replied in denial and noted that there are a lot of people here and they can compete outside. Fugui agreed to his condition. The old man began to peek and laugh, saying that the young master might not be the best in the world in martial arts, but his size was definitely amazing. He will hope that this guy will withstand the shock so that the shadow of lifelong impotence does not fall on him. Immediately, the old man screamed very loudly and thereby scared the moons. The old man opened the door and started running towards Fugui, who was in shock and on his knees. He started crying and noted that there is such a huge thing in the world. The protagonist, flying away, said that he did not want to mock Fugui, but he decided to compete in this himself, but also noted that it would be necessary to change this idiotic thinking already.